Yo, what's going on, fight fans? Welcome back. It is UFC 300 fight week. We have been deep in the trenches doing our research because we've got a great card. Some weeks I come to you guys, I complain a little bit. I bitch, I moan, I've got my grievances. The fight card's not living up to your expectations. It's in the UFC Apex. But this is a card I have no complaints. I'm excited about this card. I'm fired up to get to the action. We've got great fights from the top to the bottom, all the way on down. We might even have a special guest coming on to discuss a big bet that they've got on the event. If you guys are new here, welcome aboard. My name is Liam. I pick fights on this channel each and every week. And if you guys have not been here in the past, we've got a track record going back a long time on this YouTube channel on betmma.tips. You could find all my work. Last week, not my week at the office, couple bad bets, a couple bad beats, just was the way it was, but ready to get back to work this week for UFC 300, best card of the year, one of the best cards of all time. So without further ado, let's start like we always do on First Look with the main event of the evening. And if you guys are new here, just want to say off the rip, I'm going to do even more research, especially more tape study between now and the next time I talk to you guys, which is for Bets and Banter on the panel show tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Special start time because we are accommodating very, very special guests for the Bets and Banter panel. It's going to be Clint from Die Hard MMA alongside Just Win Baby, Rich. The meeting of the minds finally going to come to pass. I know that people are going to be fired up about that in the community. There's been some banter, some words said, but I think that there's room for common ground here. And, two great guys in the community that do, some different things. And Clint's been doing this for a long time. So excited to have him back on the show, friend of the show. Excited to see those guys potentially mend the fences. So a lot of good things on the horizon. And also John Stargarian from Club and Sub fame, very sharp friend of the show as well. Excited to have him back on the panel. So you guys, should be fired up about that. I'm going to have a link posted for that ASAP. If you guys want to make sure that you're here, go ahead and hit that notification bell. Go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. But without further ado, we've got Jamahal Sweet Dreams Hill taking on Alex Pereira in the main event of the evening. And I think this is a fantastic fight. And I want to lead off my commentary here by saying this is not a fight that makes me, extremely confident, right? I don't come into this with a very bullish take. A lot of guys this week, one side or the other, are, 5 units, 6 units. This is a huge bet. This is an obvious side. This is a clear edge. And, I respect that, but that's not my level of conviction, right? And so when I'm betting based on my confidence intervals. And, I don't have a very high confidence interval on this fight. Why? Let's start off with the fact it's a light heavyweight matchup. Inherently, that's going to cause some volatility. Then let's talk about the fact that we've got Alex Pereira. He's a little bit older, right? 36 years of age. He's on his second career in combat. It's the guy who was fighting in kickboxing for a long time, storied career, fought a lot of the best, traded blows with some of the best. And then you look at his MMA career, rapid rise to the top, but he hasn't had that much experience, especially when we're talking about this light heavyweight division. Now, Alex Pereira is huge. He's very well equipped to fight anybody. He's got a great left hook. He's got excellent low kicks. If you had to project who had a grappling advantage here, I would reckon that's somewhat hard to do. I think that Jamahal Hill, probably projects to be a better wrestler than Pereira. However, I think that Pereira has shown some interesting grappling sequences, especially in his, more recent fights. His ability to survive the Blachowicz onslaught, I thought was somewhat impressive as well. I thought he was getting finished in that fight. And, Jan Blachowicz, maybe not the stiffest test, maybe not as stiff a test as he once was. But if you look at Jan Blachowicz historically, he's got many submissions in the UFC. He's a guy that can grapple with some quality grapplers and get the win. So I think that this is an interesting, test of both guys. And I frankly don't think this fight is going to hit the mat. So you've got a great, legendary stand-up kickboxing fighter in Alex Pereira, who's a little bit older, who has been, chin-checked a few times in his career, who has been, rocked, wobbled, hurt in some other fights that he was able to survive, but how sustainable is that long-term? So you look at those factors and you say, man, Can I really get to laying chalk with Alex Pereira in this spot? But on the other side, you've got Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill, a great fighter, a guy who's got excellent skills, a guy who's very tenacious inside the octagon, wants to go out there and get in a scrap, not afraid of violence, not afraid to get hurt. You guys remember when this guy gets his arm snapped by Paul Craig and he's just out there throwing some hammer fists, the referee's just very nonchalant about the whole situation. It was unbelievable. And I think Jamahal Hill has great toughness. I think that he's got excellent volume, especially for a light heavyweight. You look at the ability to go out there and throw to multiple levels of the body. He could throw teep kicks. He could throw low kicks. He could throw his boxing combinations down the middle. And there's a chance that he could land any of those shots and knock out Alex Pereira. But we also have to consider he's coming back off a pretty catastrophic injury. Was that outside of the octagon? Yes, it was. Is it still something I think we should consider? Yes. Now, can we see, younger athletes especially come back from these injuries? Absolutely we can. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it might take one or two performances to get right, so to speak. And we've seen Jamahal Hill come back and lay out a vengeance before, right? I think he broke Jim Crute's face after the Paul Craig fight. So we know that this guy has bad intentions. He can knock out his opponents. He's got heavy hands. He's got an ability to fight in, all phases. So I do think that this is a tough test for Alex Pereira. So when I look at that, would I be tempted to bet Jamahal Hill? If he wasn't coming off an injury, I think I definitely would be a little bit tempted. But I also think he's got, a clear ego, right? When you look at that Paul Craig fight, for example, Paul Craig is a known guard grappler, right? He's an excellent jiu-jitsu player, particularly off his back. And when you look at that fight, there was one opportunity where I felt like Jamahal Hill could have exited the exchange, right? He was in an armbar sequence and he was kind of able to get his arm out. And it looked like he had an opportunity to maybe disengage from the guard. But I think his ego, and I think he would have said this as well. His ego kept him in that range, in that phase of the fight. And shortly thereafter, he gets his arm absolutely mangled, kind of set back his career. So I think that that's an interesting note coming into this fight where, if you have an ego battle with Alex Pereira, it could look like the Sean Strickland fight. Strickland was out there getting touched to the body, trying to do his normal shtick, come forward, apply the pressure, get in your face, same old Strickland, right? The things that normally work. And unfortunately, he met that left hook. He got absolutely clipped because he was expecting another jab, to the body, to the solar plexus, and he got caught out of position there. So when I'm looking at this fight, I say to myself, man, both these guys have clear paths to knocking each other out. I think Alex Pereira has excellent low kicks. I think when you're coming back off of a leg injury, that could be something that could compromise you mentally or physically. You look at Chris Weidman, he talked about the fact against Brad Tavares that he got worried about his leg that had been injured. So he started to put it back into, the rear stance. And then he got his other leg kicked so bad that it got injured severely. So when I'm looking at this fight, I'm saying to myself, man, you've got a fantastic fighter in Jamahal Hill, but he's saying, I'm going to go fight this guy where he's the best. I'm going to go fight this guy in his range and in his phase. And I think he can win that fight. But I also think that invites Alex Pereira to win the fight. It invites him to land damaging blows. And this is light heavyweight, guys. You make one mistake, you move out of position one time, the fight could be over. We're talking about a guy in Alex Pereira who's floored people with one strike, left hook, good night, sleeping for minutes at a time. So it doesn't matter if you're a really tough guy or a badass. I think Jamahal Hill has a great chin. From what we've seen inside the octagon, fantastic. However, he's a human being, right? He's still a man. So I think that he could get clipped by a left hook from Alex Pereira like any other man, woman, or child in the world and get knocked unconscious. Like that's the kind of power that we're dealing with. Now, on the other side, Jamahal Hill, he's a huge man. He's a powerful man. He can throw a lot of weight and heft into his strikes, and he can also do it all night long. He showed that against Glover Teixeira, 5 rounds. He showed that in 15-minute fights where he's just out there running up the score with how many strikes he's landing on these guys. And I think that Alex Pereira, for all his strengths, for all the things he does well with his striking, with his hooks, with his low kicks, he's there to be hit. It's a light heavyweight fight. He's getting older, 36 years of age. He does stay in the pocket sometimes to exchange with guys. And if you do that with Jamahal Hill, you could absolutely go to sleep. So I just think that this is a really fantastic fight. I think it's phenomenal matchmaking from the UFC. I called for this fight after UFC 295. I did this matchmaking tweet, and I tweeted it out again earlier today. They booked this fight, and I'm excited about it. It's a fight I wanted to see. It's a fight that I believe we should see. And, the injury concerns aside, I think that there's really two guys that both have a goal and a dream, and Alex Pereira on the verge of doing something special. When you look at what he's done in terms of beating all these UFC champions, coming in with very little experience and paving his way at the top, there's been a lot of really impressive work done by Alex Pereira in a short amount of time, beating Sean Strickland, then going on and helping Sean Strickland claim the UFC title. He went into his camp. He helped him beat Adesanya. So I think that you see a lot of attributes from Alex Pereira where he improves he improves the quality of fighters around him. And I think that this is a guy who is, putting in the right work in the gym. I think Glover Teixeira is going to have him prepared for this kind of fight, for this kind of task. So I think both guys are going to come ready. I think both guys are going to be dangerous, and it's a light heavyweight fight. So I'm kind of surprised to see the over chalked out here. I know it's UFC 300. I mean, this is a big fight feel. Maybe both guys a little bit tenacious here, a little bit, trepidatious. That's the word I'm looking for. A little bit hesitant to get into the pocket when you have such a matchup where both guys have power, right? Maybe they show a little bit of respect for one another and kind of keep a little distance in the early going, find their range, a little bit of fight feeling out process. But that's not really how I see it. I think Jamahal Hill is going to come out here very aggressive, try and get his game going early, try and get, some strikes landed, try and build up some momentum. And I think that could lead to a collision early where somebody gets slept. So for me, it just feels like I'm a little surprised to see, a chalked out over here, but it is at 1.5 rounds for a 5-round fight. We have seen a ton of these main events go long, so I definitely understand it. And both guys are tactical. Both guys are smart, but I think that both guys could get clipped here, man. It's light heavyweight, and it's two guys that both pack a real serious pop on their shots. So for me, it just feels like a fight where violence is somewhat inevitable. But with that being said, I'm ready to move on to the co-main event of the evening. Y'all let me know what you guys think about this main event and the co-main event. Thank you to the sharpest chat in the game who's assembling here on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who's watching along on X as well. Come and join us on YouTube. Easier for you to find the show continuously. However, I appreciate you wherever you're watching the show from. Thank you all so much. Now, want to just shout out a couple of people in the chat here before we move on. Kadeem says, what's up? Shout out on Cornell. That's a great call by you. Shout out to K-Dog. Says 300 is upon us. Appreciate that. Sasso says, Liam, you are so big, bro. I appreciate you, Sasso. Probably a joke, but we'll take it nonetheless. Now we need Pepe and Lucrative. Shout out to the Jewish Better. Shout out to Steph Herdson. LFG, appreciate you. Justin J says, howdy fellas from Mount Rushmore. Appreciate you and appreciate John Valentine pulling up, says, what's up, Liam, and all the other night owls currently packing for Vegas in the morning. Damn, you're headed to the event. Let's go, John. Enjoy that show, my man. You deserve it. But without further ado, why don't we bring in the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour. What you see is what you get, and what you don't is better yet. The Jewish Better. Back in the building. He's got a bet on the co-main event. How you feeling, my brother?
I thought I was supposed to come in with the raps, bro. What's up, my dude? Feeling.
That's a Chael classic if you don't know it.
I wasn't even paying attention, but now that you say it, it makes sense, man. I like his one where he went Sean Combs. He just spazzed on it. John Jones. What was it again? Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about.
Sean Combs, John Holmes, John Jones, and something else. I can't remember them all.
Bro.
But
JLP son and the GOAT. He was rapping before any of your favorite rappers.
Hell yeah, man. So, what's the play, my man? I think you feel pretty confident about this fight. You've been talking about it on X for a little while. I remember people gave you some big time grief, and that can go both ways, right? Like sometimes people will take the dirt and pour it on your grave, right? If you get one wrong, but as you and I have discussed many times, right? I'd almost always rather be, right or excuse me, wrong and alone than right with the crowd. And it's not one to one, right? Because I do think there's times when it doesn't matter if it's the public side, if it's the right side, right? You're trying to look for the correct bet. You're trying to look for the value side, whether it's the side that the public's betting on or not. Sometimes the sharps get absolutely barbecued, but more often than not, the sharps win, right? Because that's why they're sharp, right? So you just look statistically, they're going to win more often than not. But do they win every time? No. If it was that easy, everybody just tail the sharps and bing bang boom, right? So it's like even sharps can go on winning, losing streaks. But in a fight like this, you have a play where you're ready to stick your neck out on the line a little bit for a dog. And as we always discuss, a willingness to be wrong and look like a fool is essential to actually win money in this sport. It's the reason why I feel I've won money betting on underdogs. And I think that you have a chance to do so as well this weekend, my brother. How do you feel?
Yeah, so many underdogs on this card, bro. We kind of already talked about it a little, but just the feel of this card is way different than anything. I've personally been a part of in a long time. Just to say that right off the rip. Maybe I'm wrong, but this got to be the biggest week in UFC betting wise. UFC wise, I think this is going to be a crazy card. I think a lot of people that normally wouldn't be betting definitely going to be betting on this card. Definitely going to be capturing the eye of a lot of different viewers, right? Even the last card, a lot of big names, 299. I think this card's going to be even bigger than that. And there was a big turnout at the books, big turnout at the sports bars for even that card. Um, a lot of people in the original. I know I'm going off on a little bit of a diatribe because we're talking about this fight, but man, it's just a big week, dude. That's all I really have to say. And yeah, I like Yan Nan, man. I do. I think she's being way too mispriced here. Plus 375. I've seen plus 385 on some books. Whoo, keep it coming. Keep that Whaley money coming in because I think you're not giving this girl a chance at that price. And I think a lot of the thing is people think it's going to be a wash, right? It's going to be Whaley takes her down. We see exactly what happened in the Carla Esparza fight. But I think that's way too. It could definitely happen like that. I think we've seen way too many improvements from her in the Mackenzie Dern fight. I know that was one fight, but remember, right? Nobody gave her a chance in that fight because it was coming off the Carla Esparza loss where she got absolutely washed. Then she changed camps, took a little while off, and we were both on her in that Apex event. Zuckerberg and the crowd, everybody and their mother on Mackenzie Dern. Because how can Mackenzie Dern, not just dominate her on the ground? Problem with that now, though, is Mackenzie Dern isn't the greatest wrestler. But she came with relentless pressure in that fight to get Yan Nan down to the mat. And Yan Nan looked 20 times better than she did in the Carla Esparza fight. The way she stuffed the head there, she still looked a little timid, I will say. I don't think she let her full arsenal of punches go due to the worry. But when we saw it in the Jessica Andrade fight, this girl's, consistently keeping the range. Even the Marina Rodriguez fight, where I thought she won. This girl's ability to maintain the range and get out of the way of danger is incomparable to any at strawweight. I think she's extremely smart with the way she fights. I think her setup for a lot of her strikes keeps her out of range of a lot of takedowns as well, Liam, because if this was a straight up wrestling match, yeah, I'll take Wei Li Zhang. Of course, she's gonna probably take her down and dominate her there. This isn't a straight up wrestling match, and I've cashed a lot of tickets on these type of bets, right? Sergey Spivak versus Cyril Gane. Everybody thought Sergey Spivak get on top of Cyril Gane. Nobody mentioned the footwork. This guy wasn't able to get a hold of him. Do I think Wei Li Zhang's the worst striker? No, but I think she has trouble with when people lay back and try to counter on her. I think she likes when people come forward. She can play the straightforward game, where she's pressuring, but I think Yan Xiaonan's such a good counter striker that she might be getting clipped on the way in. So how does she close that distance? And that's where I think this fight's going to be won. Who can, bait the other person into playing their game? Because if Yan Xiaonan could keep this fight on the feet, I don't think Weili Zhang stands a chance. And I know a lot of people are going to call me crazy for that. And the last thing I'll say is I think Yan Xiaonan, once this does get to the mat, I don't want to see it there. As a Yan Xiaonan better, let's keep this fight on the feet, baby, all day. We win this easy money. But I think she could get taken down here. I think she might be on the ground. But I don't think Weili Zhang is going to finish her. Watching the Amanda Lemos fight, even Lemos had her in some deep chokes, bro. And I know people are going to call me crazy. I just don't think Weili's a complete fish, dude. She trains at a great gym with Team Alpha Male. They had a great front headlock series. But she doesn't even want to engage. And she'll just back off, push stuff on the head. I love everything I see from her. But I've also cashed a bunch of underdog tickets on her. Bias? Maybe. But I got to go back to the well, plus 375, bro. Not even a question.
I absolutely love it. I love the bold take. I love the confidence. I think you brought up a lot of good points, and I'm excited to talk about this fight. But first, we got to give a shout to my man. Daz File says, readers are leaders. Note takers are money makers. You know that, brother. Liam, never let your highs get you too high or your lows too low. Got to give a shout out because you said that, Daz, to my wrestling coach in college, Jamie Gibbs, Coach Derek Brunson, coached a lot of great athletes along the way. A lot of guys way better at wrestling and everything else than I am. But I'll tell you what, it teaches you a lot about life. And those are things that I've taken with me. Powerful statements, simple, but powerful. And I try and pass them along to other people because I've done those things and it's helped me immensely in my journey trying to win bets and also, just trying to improve as a person. So shout out to Daz File, shout out for the dono, and also shout out for bringing up those points because, man, those are two things that can never be said enough on this show. And that being said, man, let's talk about this fight. Let's talk about this fight and let's talk about the fact that you've got two great fighters. That's what I'm looking at here. And I'm looking at a perception that we've got one great fighter. But I think you've got to look at Yan Xiaonan's body of work. And when you look at Yan Xiaonan's body of work, she has the same record in the UFC as Zhang Weili. And I know that might take some people by surprise. She's 8-2 in the promotion. How does the UFC work? Is it a meritocracy? Do you just does every shot get afforded to you based on your merit? No, absolutely not. Right. How do you normally get the shot? You get the shot one of two ways, right? Either you're a star or you eventually guilt them into giving you the shot through merit, right? Or timing or inconvenience or whatever it is. Because you look at malcontents, randoms in the division, guys that you didn't necessarily expect to get the title shot. How about Tyron Woodley? Right? 36 years of age, guy that nobody was really expecting to get the title shot. And he gets like a TKO win over, Carlos Condit via injury. Like he just had a weird run. Johnny Hendricks misses weight for a fight. They didn't have the fight. And he advances to the title shot. It's kind of just the way it was. And then he knocks out Robbie Lawler in the first round and the rest is history. Right. So it's sometimes it's like you just have fortuitous circumstance. You get the title. Sean Strickland. Now he's kind of a household name. Now people really like him and gravitate towards him. Was he like a big A-side going into that Izzy fight? No, everybody thought Izzy's the star. Minus 500. Why is he here? Who is this guy? Sometimes that's the way it is in a title fight, right? It's one night. You don't have to be better than them at everything. You don't have to be better than them at MMA. You have to be better than them on one night. And when you look at Zhang Weili, I think one of the things that goes underrated is she got pushed faster. Right. So she's got the big social following. She is a very well-known fighter. She's a very popular girl. She's done hard work in the UFC to earn that popularity. She's only lost to another all-timer in a lot of ways in Rose Namajunas, right? She's gone out there. She's had a couple close fights. She's had a couple sketchy moments, especially early on in her run. But Zhang Weili, there's nothing you could say to really discredit her. I mean, she's a great fighter. She got chin checked one time, knocked out, bing, bang, boom, right? And then she protested the stoppage. Tough girl, still wanted to be in there. But we all saw what we saw. She was out in that fight. That was a good stoppage, proper. And when you look at the rematch, man, I bet Zhang Wei Li in both those fights against Rose Namajunas. So I have been there getting burnt by Zhang Wei Li at chalk, right? Minus 205, I was there. Minus 125, man, I was still there. 0 for 2, right? And when you look at those fights, the things that were a little bit concerning is like Rose was, not afraid to grapple with her, right? Not afraid to push back in the grappling. Hey, I'll get on top of you. I'll try and use some of my physicality back. And when I'm looking at this fight, is Yan Xiaonan as physical as Zhang Weili? No, right? We could all look and say probably not. But is she like a limp noodle? That's not true either. And one of the things I found interesting just handicapping this fight is you have an example of Zhang Wei Li. You got many examples of her getting hurt, by the way. Go back and watch them. Danielle Taylor fight, a couple others. She's been clipped before. She's just really tough and, no quitting her. Most of the time she can dominate with the grappling. You hit her with a big shot. Hey, let me take her down. Let me get on top. But we got a 5-round fight. It's a long time to be out there. And you've got an explosive striker in Yan Xiaonan. Has she put away everybody? No, but she's hurt, damaged, rocked girls, bloodied them up, battered them, landed a ton of volume. We've seen Zhang Wei Li in a lot of wars, even in the fights where she comes out aces, right? Fight of the year against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Yeah, Joanna Jędrzejczyk looked like an alien. Zhang Wei Li looked pretty swollen too. Like everybody got beat up in that fight. Like nobody came out of that looking daisies, right? Everybody got beat up in that fight. So I just think that you've had one girl had a harder road in the UFC. Is that a good thing? I mean, for better or worse, I think that, we've kind of seen, hey, I got one litmus test, right? Carlos Esparza, former champion. And by the way, I think you look at the level of motivation from Carlos Esparza. It was at an all-time high leading into the Yan Xiaonan fight. Needs one win, and I am getting the title shot. Needed to be a finish. Can't settle for a decision. And we have never seen Carlos Esparza so aggressive on top, so aggressive looking for takedowns. She was out there looking for blood. And yes, there was embarrassing footage in that fight. Let's just be clear, right? Yan Xiaonan made some mistakes, did the armbar to herself, all these things that are terrible. But when you look, she was training in China, right? Like she was not giving herself the right tools, in my humble opinion, to win. And it's not to denigrate the level of athlete. It's to say there are certain people that have this knowledge. They live in certain parts of the world. China is not one of them predominantly, right? There might be a handful of jiu-jitsu instructors that are black belts, but there's just like, you can go to 10 gyms in Vegas right now that have black belts teaching classes. It's like there's just a different level, a different access, a different popularity, and it's just more ubiquitous. So now we're looking at a spot where it's like, okay, is she a fool, right? Is she arrogant? Did she think like, well, no problems here. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and figure it out. It's like, no, she's like, okay, if I want to get my goal, which is to be the champion, I need to go to America. I need to learn to wrestle. I need to learn to grapple. I'm going to Team Alpha Male. I'll learn from Uriah Faber. And she's out there doing the damn thing. And when she was going to fight Mackenzie Dern, man, I remember the talk from the community is one takedown, the fight's over. One takedown is the round easily. And these things just proved not to be true, right? Like we had freaking bets on Yan Xiaonan. Was it a close fight? Yeah. Was it a sweat? Sure.
Super sweat.
But was it also a fight where, we cashed a plus 200, fading the popular fighter at the time? Right now, stock's low on Mackenzie Dern, so watch her choke out some bum in her next fight. I'm kidding, but like you just see, like that's kind of the way this game tends to go, right? Stock goes up, stock goes down. What have you done for me lately? Kind of sport. And for Yan Xiaonan, she hasn't done as much hard work as Zhang Wei Li, but I also think she doesn't have some of the same battle scars as a result. She has one positional TKO loss where she just couldn't move, right? She's stuck in a wrestling position, can't move, getting beat up. They're always going to stop those ones, right? You look at the other side, she got flatline knocked out in the first round by a kick to the face. It's like, those are categorically different. What is the big win, the defining win, the signature win for Zhang Wei Li? How'd she capture the gold in the first place, my brother? How'd she get the title? She banged out Jessica Andrade in one round. So what did Yan Xiaonan do? The exact same thing. It's like these women have just gone out there and shown to be very similar in all regards, except for the offensive wrestling and grappling from, Zhang Wei Li. So it's like, do I think she should be favored in the fight? Yeah, absolutely. Minus 185. Okay. maybe I'm not even having this discussion with you, right? At plus 150, I mean, I'd just be like, you know what? There's just so much grappling downside that this could look like a really bad wager. Because I'll tell you, man, I've been there for 3 bets on what's her name, Yan Xiaonan, and I made a lot of money, right? I had 4 units at plus 200. I had 1 unit at minus 130 against Claudia Gadelia, another good grappler, another solid fighter, by the way, that she beat along the way. So she's beaten quality girls. She's been around the UFC. She's got the same 8-2 record. Like, show me the huge difference on paper. There's a huge size advantage. No, they have the same measurables. Okay, well, she's way older. No, they're the same age. It's like they just seem very similar to me. So when I look at those things on paper, like Zhang Weili, better game plans, less, terrible grappling footage. Like I acknowledge those things. I'll check those boxes. Minus 185, minus 200. We're not having the conversation, but minus 500 WMMA. I don't see that. I don't see that personally. And honestly, I thought against Amanda Lemos, it was way more of a layup, right? I was like, Amanda Lemos, she's going to go out there and finish this girl. I was like, she's going to embarrass her. She's going to dominate her in the grappling. It's not going to be close. It's a white belt on the ground. And I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to Amanda Lemos, who has a very dangerous guillotine and has some, some things that you want to see offensively. But defensively, guys, I mean, just void on the mat. No idea in some positions. Like, literally in the standing arm triangle, I always make the joke, and I don't mean to be rude, but like she looked like she saw a ghost. She's like, not good. So when I think about that, I just say to myself, man, this is a fight where a lot could go wrong at minus 500, right? Could a lot go right? Yeah. Could she cover the price? Sure. But I think a lot could go wrong. It's a title fight. It's a high level fight. Big crowd, big atmosphere, a lot of pressure at minus 500, right? When everybody thinks you're going to win, when everybody thinks you're going to dominate, what if the first round's harder than you expect? Now you start to breathe heavy. Now you start to get a little doubt in your mind. Now the pressure starts to build up. It just seems like anytime it's a fight that's harder than you expect it to be, things could go wrong. And Zhang Weili is not afraid of a firefight. She stood in the pocket with Yueni and Jacek and almost went to sleep, just going crazy, winging shots, crazy banger. And she showed heart, mettle, toughness, all the things you want to see. That was also years ago. So now she's got to do it again. And it's like, you got to keep digging into that well. How many champions have we seen after they reach the pinnacle a couple times? They don't have that same fire, the same desire. You know who's really hungry to win a damn title right now? Yan Xiaonan. She needs this for her money, for her life, for her legacy, for all the shit she's put into this, for moving her life one place to another. She's not getting another one unless she wins 5 more fights. So it's just like, I think you're going to get the best Yan Xiaonan. I don't know who's going to win the fight. I have no bets on the fight, but I'm just going to wait and see what happens with this line, because I have a feeling, the money's going to keep coming in. And I think it's a great fight, man. I do think that it's competitive. I'm not ever counting out Zhang Weili from a fight. I think her corner, her camp, the people around her, she puts herself in a position to succeed. She works hard. She's likable. There's a lot of things to like about her. But again, it's like, this isn't a popularity contest. This is a cage fight for 25 minutes. And again, Yan Xiaonan doesn't have to be the better wrestler to win this fight. She just needs to stay upright, use her footwork, land enough big shots. If it gets clinched along the fence, land the shots there, outwork her, outpace her, land a big shot in the first round like Rose Namajunas and leave it out of the conversation, get the filthy judges out of the conversation, all these things. So it just seems to me like a great fight. And, I think that, could they run it back as a fight night main event in China? Yeah. Could they run it back as a, co-main event at any pay-per-view this year? Absolutely. So it's like, just seems to me like a fight where the division, maybe a couple contenders on the men, right? A couple contenders that had some injuries. I think Tatiana Suarez been back and forth in weight class, but I think she's been a little bit on the men, was supposed to have a big fight. So you look at some of these things, man, it just seems like maybe they would not mind having this one ran twice. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. It's a fun fight, fascinating fight. I think Zhang Weili is a great fighter, but I just think Yan Xiaonan maybe doesn't get her due. And I think people that have been watching the sport a long time, like myself, like yourself, we've kind of seen Yan Xiaonan be around for a long time, being very good, winning a lot of fights, and maybe not getting the plaudits. Frankly, between you and me, I thought she beat Marina Rodriguez. That was a fight where I had no bets on the fight. And I thought people got hosed on the +2 whatever XX money line. So she's 3-1 as an underdog in the UFC off the top of my head. And I think there's a fair argument she could be 4-0, my brother. So fantastic fight. And Zhang Weili has produced money for you if you bet her as a favorite. Make no mistake. But she's also cost you a couple times, and I was there for those. So I remember those distinctly. And I think a lot of people who have just been seeing her lately, they're like, yeah, she steamrolls people at -400. But I think Amanda Lemos, that's just a different ballgame as far as I'm concerned. I think Yan Xiaonan's a little bit more tactical. I think Amanda Lemos a little bit more raw violence, get in your face, throw a lot of craziness. She's got technique, but she's got it for about 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes. And honestly, the fact that she survived 25, bro, was astounding to me.
Is it indicative of Amanda Lemos's great defensive grappling on the ground, or is it a lack of finishing ability on top of Weili Zhang? Because we saw her take the back of Carla Esparza, right? It was a quick back take, and I could probably talk about this fight for 6 hours, bro. But go ahead,
dude. I didn't finish my thought on that. The Carla Esparza that showed up to fight Zhang Weili, guys, they didn't want to be there. I don't know if I'm breaking any news to people, but guys, she had been a champion, reached the pinnacle again. She took the wedding photo. She did the whole thing. I think she did not care. That is the God's honest truth. I think she looked flat walking into that fight. She's like, and I know she kind of does the stoic thing coming into every fight, but oh my goodness, guys, I knew she was going to lose that fight. And I believe I had the fight ends by sub at a pretty decent number there. Was happy with how that turned out. I thought Carla had some submission equity, and I just knew she was going to. I was like, please, Weili, do not KO her. Please submit her in this fight. And the way she submitted her, I mean, also again, between you and me, that's not working very often in the training room. That was a little bit of a weird finish there. And I just think that that's something where, Carla was a little bit overmatched and a little bit frustrated physically with the fight. And she's tiny, by the way. So I just think that those kind of factors played a big part. And I think that Yan Xiaonan, prior to that fight with Carla Esparza, her stats were like the least amount of time spent on her back, the least amount of takedowns conceded. She had all these like categories checked off, and then she got blown out of the water by Carla. And now people want to sell her down the river. And I just feel like motivated Carla is a problem for everybody. And her and Rose put on that sell job, whatever you guys want to think about that, that's your prerogative. It's just a complete non-fight, a complete non-entity. But when you look at that, that's a fight where it's like, okay, throw that one out of the sample size. I mean, who's punking Carla Esparza? I mean, just like, let's be serious. One girl ever, Joanna and Jacek. So it's like, yeah, Carla Esparza is fucking for real. Good fighter, serious threat to anybody. So I just think that when you look at those factors, like, yeah, motivated Carla Esparza comes out there, puts her on her back, gets to her best positions, kind of takes her off guard. Like, Carla Esparza, never this aggressive, never trying to pass guard. She's literally always conservative or going for a footlock like a moron from the top position, give up the top position. No disrespect to the great Carla Esparza, but like, again, she made a lot of negative EV decisions in her career that cost her like cleaner wins. Like, I think it was against Marina Rodriguez. She's literally like, guard pulling ankle locks from top position. I'm like, my coach would probably have a heart attack if I did that in a match, because it's just like, keep the good position and make them more tired. Like, if then an ensuing scramble happens, if you want to enter on legs because you have them dead to rights, okay. But just like the proposition of wrestler drops back for seated ankle lock to try and finish the fight, I was like, what is happening? It was unbelievable decision making from her there. So I just look at this, man, and I say, a motivated Carla took her out, and she learned every right lesson, and now she's got a big opportunity in front of her at plus 3XX. The refuge of the underdog better, my brother. What is it?
How wrong could I be?
How wrong could you be? Thank you for being here. Thank you for dropping the knowledge. Want to just shout out Laurel Robinson, who asks, is Jewish better on X? Let the people know where they can find you, and any other thoughts, anything you want to get off your chest, please, brother, fire away.
Thank you, bro. At MMA Line Mover. That's at MMA Line Mover. Yeah, man, I think the sidekick's going to be there for Yan Xiaonan. I think a lot of people are going to be confused on this breakdown. They're going to be like, wait, what? He said Carla Esparza, wasn't good, but she is good. What's going on? No, it's MMA.
The two-time world champion isn't good. These people, man, I don't understand.
I think styles make fights too. I think, when you're forced when you're a wrestler and you're forced to stand, you can't really get the takedowns, could become a little bit panicky. Whereas, when you got the access to the easy takedowns, there, I think Weili Zhang, if she's coming in with a pure wrestling game plan, might be gravely mistaken in this fight. She's going to have to find ways to close the distance. And like I said, I go for hours about how both these girls could do so. But I think that's where the fight plays out, and that's where we see who wins. Thank you, my man.
I absolutely love it. JB is the GOAT. Shout out to Boone in the chat. Shout out to all you guys here. Listen, could we be wrong? Absolutely. But I have a big ROI on big underdogs, and this is one that I've been thinking about since the fight was announced. Whenever there's a lot of high public perception on a champion, I always just say, like, how outclassed could somebody be in a title fight? And sometimes the answer is like they're completely outclassed. But I think more often than not, when you're taking these huge plus money lines in title fights, in elite matchups, you're going to have more of a chance of getting an edge with that plus money side. And especially you have one side here that's like very well known and one side that's not very well known. So like sometimes I'm looking to get on the side that's well known for a different reason, star power, right? But in this case, it's like, what's better for Chinese MMA? To have one champion ever in their history, or to have two champions in history, and then they're gonna fight again, and like it's something to look forward to, and it's a great storyline, and finally a rivalry, a rival for Zhang Weili as opposed to somebody she steamrolls. And maybe it's not that, but at 34 years of age against somebody who's an age contemporary, a size contemporary, how wrong could you be? My brother, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for stopping by, pal.
God bless, my man.
God bless, and I hope to see you in the chat. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks to everybody who's rocking with us. And thank you, of course, to our guy, Line Mover, Jewish Better. Nobody do it better than the Jewish Better. And he's putting his money where his mouth is always. He has the bet slips. He's a guy that goes out there and really bets. And from everything I've seen, he really wins. So God bless him for it. I'm always rooting for my man, Jewish Better. And he puts his money where his mouth is, balls on the table, not afraid to take an underdog, not afraid to take a favorite and lay the chalk when the time calls for it. So I just really respect what he does. And I think he's a guy that's going to continue to make his come up in the space. So thank you to him for being here, friend of the show. But with that being said, guys, let us move to the next fight on the bill, where we've got Justin the Highlight Gaethje taking on Blessed Max Holloway. What a fight. What a night. You've got two great fighters here. Absolutely unbelievable matchmaking. Is it a little bit weird? Yes. Did it feel a little bit forced at the time they announced it? Sure. But does it feel right now? Yeah, it does feel right. There's just something about this matchup where Max Holloway's a guy that was willing to step up and fight Khabib on short notice. Max Holloway's a guy that's basically said yes to every opportunity, to every fight. And he's a guy that really takes a lot of risk. And, he's willing to find out, hey, this was too much. I couldn't make it. But he's willing to fight any man. He's willing to take on these really tough challenges. And a lot of guys don't want to fight the contenders of the division, right? A lot of guys don't want to fight those, ranked guys on the way up. Max Holloway's done that. He's defended the spot. He beat Yair Rodriguez. He beat Arnold Allen, ended the longest win streak active at featherweight at the time, outside the champion. So I just think that you look at this guy, Max Holloway, and you have to say, I'm not going to put limits on this guy. He is a real fighter. He's a guy who's willing to step up to any man, take on any challenge. And you look at the other side here, Justin Gaethje is a guy that I haven't always got his fights right. Sometimes I put faith in Gaethje and he's gone out there and blown it. Sometimes I've, thought, hey, Gaethje's, out to lunch here. There's no chance. I thought he was going to lose to Fiziev. Frankly, I thought he did lose to Fiziev, but it was a super close fight. And man, the way that he blooded him up, I think that if you're scoring it by pride rules, you got to give that to Justin Gaethje because he damaged his eye. He absolutely battered him. But I thought by the 10-9 must system, I thought I probably would have given that to Fiziev in rounds 1 and 2. But in any case, you look at the, the matchup between these two guys, and, some of the things that people are going to bring up are obvious this week. You've got a guy in Justin Gaethje who throws heavy leg kicks. We've seen Max Holloway, get a little bit uncomfortable with some of the leg kicks from Yair Rodriguez as well as from Alexander Volkanovski. So I think that those are the things that Justin Gaethje is going to be trying to unload in this fight. He's going to try and wind up, throw some big leg kicks, trying to take the legs out from under the primary boxer, the best boxer in the UFC, baby, Max Holloway. And when you're looking at Max Holloway, what he has done with his career is he's always evolved, over time. And I think that we've seen Max Holloway, start to flirt with his wrestling, start to flirt with his grappling in these fights when he feels it's called for, when he feels he has an advantage there. And that's something that we've seen him, use to eke out these decisions, to find ways to win when these other guys want to press him with pressure, when these other guys want to get in his face, when these other guys want to land hard shots. Now, against Justin Gaethje, he comes from a great wrestling background. He's a big guy. He's a physical guy in this lightweight division, no doubt about that. But he is 35 years of age. He has graduated college a long time ago. Not sure how much time he spends on the jiu-jitsu mats, for example. He does strike me as a guy who's very talented with his initial scrambling, with his ability to wrestle through a position. But I think that when you start to put him in extended scrambles, like we saw with Charles Oliveira, he was in really deep danger throughout those scrambles. I thought that we saw Justin Gaethje, get kind of exposed in his grappling situations a few times in the UFC where guys were able to take advantage of him. Now, he was able to get one takedown so far in his UFC career against Fiziev, and that was, kind of half-hearted, and he didn't really get any control time from it. So I think that, the guy who's got more projected wrestling and grappling upside, and I know this might take some people by surprise, is Max Holloway in this matchup. Now, is it going to be difficult for him to pull that off at 155 pounds against a guy like Gaethje? I think absolutely. But I think the longer the fight goes, Max Holloway has shown incredible cardio throughout his career. And you look at Justin Gaethje, he's been finished in, I believe, every round except for the 5th round in professional MMA. And, when you look at some of those finishes, sometimes he's getting clipped on the chin. Other times he's getting worn out with pressure, with a really high-paced fight, and he's throwing crazy and he's going mad and he's having these high-paced brawls and he's running out of gas, and he's starting to break from body shots, and for people really, pushing the pace on him. And Justin pushes the pace on others, right? So he kind of creates this chaos, but I don't know that he can always sustain the chaos. And Max Holloway has had a sensational chin throughout his career. It's very hard to stumble, rock, wobble, back up Max Holloway. But in addition to that fact, we saw Volkanovski. I bet Volk inside the distance and hugely on the money line against Max in the 3rd fight, just because I think he's such a tactical game planner. He's the consummate competitor. He really had a lot of answers for Max Holloway's game. He was a particularly difficult stylistic matchup for Max Holloway because Max had a really tough time mixing in any wrestling and grappling against the great Volkanovski. And then on the feet, Volk has that style where he can come out there, be very evasive with his footwork, throw his low kicks, kind of mix in his boxing upstairs. And I thought he did a great job in that fight managing. But I think that we saw Max Holloway drop him several times, in that 2nd fight between those two. And we've never seen Max Holloway dropped in all these years of fighting high-level killers. And is Justin Gaethje a guy capable of dropping him? Absolutely. Is Justin Gaethje a guy capable of knocking him out? Absolutely. But you kind of almost have to prove it. You kind of almost got to go out there and show it to me because this guy, Max Holloway, will walk through fire. After he had just gone to absolute war with Dustin Poirier for 4 rounds, after he had just gone for a Darce choke to end round 4, he gets back up. He's in the corner and he sees Poirier pointing at him, and he stands up and he's going like pointing to himself, pointing to the ground, pointing to the crowd. This guy is a gamer, man, and he grew up in the UFC. He's been around for a long time. He's a younger fighter with more professional experience, does check a couple of these boxes that I'm looking for long-term. And Max Holloway's a star, man. Max Holloway's a guy that goes out there and moves units. Max Holloway's a guy, that puts asses in seats and, fans really gravitate towards him. And I think the same is true about Justin Gaethje. That's the draw of this fight. That's the pull of this fight. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. There can only be one BMF left standing. And I think that you've got a guy in Justin Gaethje who's willing to go out there and do violence and throw crazy shots, but he's also willing to die out there. And I think for Max Holloway, he's a guy who really wants to win. He's a guy who really wants to prove he's the best. He's a guy who really wants to show that fight against Poirier was not what defines his success or failure at 155 pounds. And I always thought Max Holloway could translate his game at 155 pounds. I thought he would need to be a little bit more concentrated on, moving up as a professional. I have been watching for months this Max Holloway content of him lifting weights, of him working with, doctors and dietitians, trying to make sure that his weight's in order, that he gets the right nutrition, that he's feeling good, that he's getting the right recovery, that he's lifting the right amount of weight, that he's not overtraining, that he's not undertraining. This is a guy who's very quality in his jiu-jitsu. He's very quality in his boxing. He's very quality in his kickboxing. He's got great kicks in all positions. He's got dangerous chokes. He's very hard to wrestle. He's very hard to take down. I just think that Max Holloway is a great fighter, and he's very difficult to beat. So I think that when you look at this kind of fight, Max Holloway is the side for me. I did get in when this line was significantly different. The line has come down considerably. I understand why people would want to bet Justin Gaethje here. I do think he's a fantastic fighter, but for me, I think Max Holloway is a UFC champion. I think that he is of the highest quality. He's a pound for pound list fighter, and I think that Justin Gaethje has a lot of skills. He's very good, in his positions, but I also think he makes a lot of mistakes and takes a lot of risks. And I think that Max Holloway has the gas, the will, the cardio, the heart, everything that you want to see. And he's the younger fighter here. I think he's going to be able to pull Justin Gaethje into a difficult fight, and he's going to fight like a dog for your money. So for me, I think this is a great fight, but give me Max Holloway, man. I think it's going to be a great fight, and I think Max is going to win it. Shout out to Kadeem, says round 4 and 5. That's Max's all day. He says, in my opinion, should be a pick'em. I tend to agree. Shout out to Just Win Baby. Gonna be on the panel tomorrow. Says I like Justin. Respect for that. Respect for you being here, Rich. Thanks for showing up. Great fight, and I'm excited for that one. Looking forward to seeing it play out. Speaking of bangers in the lightweight division, the next fight on this stacked UFC 300 card is in the lightweight division, and you've got the champion has a name, Charles Oliveira, do Bronx, taking on Arman Tsarukyan. And this is a fight where I like both these guys. I've kind of gone back and forth betting on and against these guys, but if you look right there, we got a UFC glove in the studio, and that's a Charles Oliveira glove, baby. This is a guy that I really respect as a martial artist. I think that his story is phenomenal, coming from nothing, building his way up, building his life and his dreams up from the bottom. And when you look, he was ridiculed when he first came to the UFC. Again, a lot of people don't know his story. I watched live when, he had the esophagus injury against Max Holloway and all these different things that went wrong, for him in his career. And to see him put it all together, win that UFC title, go on the run that he went on, I just think he's a really inspiring fighter, and I think that he is a tremendous fighter. When you look, he's one of the most dangerous fighters in UFC history by the numbers, right? Just going out there and finishing people. He's dangerous in every phase of fighting. He can knock you out. He can hurt you with strikes from the top position. He can hurt you with strikes from the bottom position. He can put you in a leg lock and tear your stuff apart. He can put you in a choke and put you to sleep. So there's not really a bad phase of Charles Oliveira's game. When you look, there's some guys that have been able to exploit him in the wrestling, right? So I think that is one place where guys have been able to get after him. But frankly, it's been few and far between. It has not been very common because most people either don't want to engage with his wrestling and grappling, which is historically very excellent. And if they do, it's only because he's already been hurt, rocked, or wobbled. And the guys that have been able to sustain in the top position in his guard, you think of a guy like Paul Felder. That is probably the best analog. If you're betting on Arman Tsarukyan, I think you're looking at the Paul Felder fight and you're saying this guy can go out there, he can survive in the guard, he can throw these big elbows, he can get on top of Charles, and he can bust him up. And I think that that's very possible. I think that the submission takes, it would have to probably be late for the Arman Tsarukyan side. I think that Charles is live in this fight in all rounds by all methods. And the reason I feel that way is because he's one of the most dangerous guys we've ever seen, right? When you look at how he approaches mixed martial arts, he's willing to go to the ground with anybody. He's willing to strike with just about anybody as well. And he kind of pulls that safety switch of pulling guard, but it's not because he's not going to answer the call when somebody comes down. He'll try and invert. He'll try and switch positions. He'll try and rotate. He'll try and lock the full guard. He'll try and, entangle the legs. So I think there's a lot that Charles does really well that makes him difficult to fight. And he's a very proven UFC underdog. He goes out there more often than not and can produce in that underdog position. Looking at my documents that I made here for the Patreon earlier this week, you've got Charles Oliveira as a dog, 7-4 in the promotion for a 55.6% return on investment. Meanwhile, Tsarukyan 8-1 as a favorite, but he's only returned you 20.8% on the dollar because he's been a heavily, favored fighter in a lot of these spots. And here's the things I want to point out on the Tsarukyan side to just temper the enthusiasm a little bit, because I like Tsarukyan, and I think he's a great fighter. I had 5 units on Tsarukyan against Joel Alvarez. Joel Alvarez is not nearly as proven as Charles Oliveira. Like, let's just not get ahead of ourselves, right? I think that people respect his game. He's a good black belt. He's a dangerous guy. He's got great elbows, great knees. But the reason I thought he was going to lose that fight is because I thought Tsarukyan was going to easily take him down, easily pass his guard, and dominate him from the top position. And if he does that to Charles Oliveira, all I'll do is take my hat off to him and say, hey, next title fight is yours, young man. You have arrived. But when I look at the fight with Gamrot, I thought that was a winnable fight for him. And I thought he did win the fight, but he left it within the margins. And when you're talking about a minus 300 favorite, don't want you leaving it within the margins, right? And Gamrot's a great fighter. It's been hard for people to get over on him. But we just saw RDA put him on the ropes, right? Rocked him with a big shot, landed a big knee in the first round. And when you look at this guy, Arman Tsarukyan, he's been dangerous. He's been a killer. He can go out there and knock people out. But Beneil Dariush had just been knocked out by Charles Oliveira. Then he gets fed to, Tsarukyan, and he gets finished in that fight as well. Hats off to the kid. He did a great job. He went out there and got the win in the finish. And he's a savage, right? He's a killer. He's a dangerous fighter. But I just don't want to write off a guy like Charles Oliveira when we know that Charles can go out there and he can knock out great fighters, right? Justin Gaethje, who people really respect, who's fighting one fight further up on the card, he got dropped badly by Charles before he got submitted in that fight. So yes, I do think he made a ton of positional mistakes on the ground, but you could forgive some of those from Gaethje just because he was so badly compromised by the striking of Charles Oliveira in that fight. And yes, he was afraid to go to the ground with him. He landed some big shots on Charles as well. But you just see the pace that he pushed in that fight had Justin, basically exhausted at the 5-minute mark. Then he got dropped and then he got finished. And, for me, that was just a sign that, like, man, this guy Charles Oliveira, when he comes dialed in, when he comes confident, he can beat anybody in the world. And you look at Arman Tsarukyan as a minus 1,000 favorite, guys. He goes out there against Neto BJJ, a guy I respect, a guy who's a very talented fighter. But Neto BJJ is no Charles do Bronx Oliveira, right? His biggest claim to fame is submitting Neil Magny at a CFFC event. A UFC welterweight up a weight class, right? That's Neto BJJ's big claim, in mixed martial arts lore. I'm half kidding, right? But that's an insider joke for all you MMA insiders. But when you're talking about this spot, man, you're looking at a guy in Charles Oliveira who represents, I think, a way bigger danger risk, both on the feet and on the ground relative to Neto BJJ. And Neto BJJ rocked Arman Tsarukyan badly with a strike on the feet. And what did he do? He ended up shooting and grabbing a hold of him, right? And he was able to do that, unabated, right? There was nothing stopping him from doing that. I think in this spot, if you shoot a takedown when you're, looking for clarity on Charles Oliveira, it could be over in an instant. You make one mistake against this guy, it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how good your jiu-jitsu is, right? You start punching somebody a couple of times, they get turned into a white belt, a purple belt, all the way, like go on down the chain, right? Punch a black belt, it turns to a brown belt, turns to a purple belt. And I think that when you're looking at this fight, I could definitely see Charles Oliveira landing big strikes, getting to a club and sub opportunity, forcing a bad shot out of Tsarukyan, getting the win here. But I could also see Charles getting taken down, dominated on the ground, because Sarukian is just that good with his positions on top, with his dominant pressure, and he can be very aggressive with his elbows. Man, he does not play around at all. And if he gets to a good position, he's not here to have fun with somebody. He's trying to hurt them really bad. He's a very violent man inside that octagon. So I have nothing but respect for Arman Sarukian. I think it's going to be a close and competitive fight. But I think somebody's getting finished here. I think it's going to be violent. I think it's going to be crazy. And the reason I feel that way is because it's a Charles Oliveira fight. And he doesn't really have many fights that don't fit that bill. And the ones that he does are typically him dominating somebody in the grappling from the top position, i.e. Tony Ferguson. So I think this is a fight where we're probably going to see some crazy exchanges on the feet, on the ground. And give me the guy who's the most dangerous guy in UFC history, Charles Oliveira, to get the win here, to teach a little bit of a vet lesson to the up-and-comer here in Arman Sarukian. But these can go either way. And I've been burnt in the past on Benoit Saint-Denis, trying to take out the older guard in Dustin Poirier. But I could get burnt here as well, because Arman Sarukian is a fantastic fighter. He's a very dangerous fighter. He's a guy that a lot of people don't know yet, and they don't respect as much as they should. However, he's gotten a ton of respect at the betting window. He always has, and he always will, because of the name, because of the wins, because of the fight with Islam. But I also think you got to factor in everything, right? He had great tape with Islam. He had bad tape with Neto BJJ. So let's just be very clear about what we saw. I said at the time, he covered the minus 1,000, because if you could get rocked like that and still go out there and take somebody down and beat up on him, then hey, I just got to give the hats off to you. You really were going to win that fight more often than not, because there was nothing that guy could do to you. But Charles Oliveira, this guy can hurt and rock anybody. He can submit black belts. We know these things. So I just think that this is a great fight on paper. And I think that it's a competitive, honest fight. So give me Charles Oliveira as an underdog in that fight in terms of my prediction. I think he's going to get the win here and, remind people what time it is. But I will say it's a great fight. And Arman Sarukian could knock him the hell out because he's a big puncher and a scary guy. But I got to go with the UFC original, man. Charles Oliveira. I think he's got another one in him. Next up, guys, we've got the main card closer. We've got Bo Nickel and Cody Brundage. I'm kidding, of course. We got the main card opener here. And Cody Brundage is a guy that I've never really been high on in the UFC. I've said it before. I think that when you talk about these huge plus money odds in mixed martial arts, it's got to be a dog or pass on the money line. Now, does that mean that I'm out there laying the Cody Brundage, taking the Cody Brundage plus money, laying this price with Bo Nickel? Absolutely not. I think Bo Nickel should win this fight at a high clip, but it's mixed martial arts. Crazier things have happened. He could go out there and tear his ACL. Lord forfend. We'd never want to see anything like that happen, but you just have to think realistically about black swan events. The guy, his girlfriend broke up with him, something went wrong in his life, right? He got a phone call he didn't want to get right before the fight. He stubbed his toe in the back. Just anything could go wrong in a mixed martial arts fight. So when you're laying, $2,500 to win $100, yeah, maybe that'll come through for you. But in a sport this volatile and crazy, especially in a division like middleweight, I just think that that's an absolute fool's errand. And I don't think long-term you'd be profitable doing that personally. Now, on the other side of things, right, Cody Brundage, his recent W's in the UFC, let's just go through his resume, because I know that this guy got his win over Malkoun via disqualification. That was a fight where I think we all agree, Cody Brundage was probably well on his way to getting finished in that fight. And it was a little bit of hard done results for Jacob Malkoun, who bounced back with a hip bone knockout at UFC Atlantic City, the weirdest card that ever took place. And I took the under 1.5 rounds last time Cody Brundage fought, because he's an under 1.5 magnet. This guy's typically gone under 1.5 rounds. And the same thing was true for his opponent last time out, Zachary Reese. The same thing is true for his opponent this time, Bo Nickel. Now, we haven't seen Nickel extended. We haven't seen Nickel, in these longer fights. And I don't think we're going to, honestly. And the reason I feel that way is because he's a fast starter. He goes out there. He's looking for his takedowns. He's looking for his submissions. And, the one thing that gave me a little pause is the fact that we did see Bo Nickel go out there in the Jamie Pickett fight, and he landed, the knee to the groin, the takedown, and then it was a weird arm triangle where he didn't quite get the right grip. However, he's so strong. that he was eventually able to finish it anyway. It wasn't a perfect grip, but he got it. And then he knocked out Val Woodburn. He's gone for the triangle choke against Donovan Beard. He submitted Zach Borrego with the rear naked choke. He's shown a little bit of versatility in how he's going to finish these fights. And I think that when you're looking at the Cody Brundage side, we know that he could get taken down, controlled, and beat up a little bit. We've kind of seen bits and pieces of that in the Maximov fight, where he debuted in the UFC. We saw that as well against Michal Oleksiejczuk. He had a good top position, got reversed, got finished with strikes from the top position in round one, kind of found a way out in that fight. He was guard pulling guillotines on Rodolfo Vieira in one of the lowest fight IQ moves I can remember inside the octagon, and he did get finished there via arm triangle choke by the legend, by a great jiu-jitsu player in Rodolfo Vieira. So he has not been submitted by anybody that you'd really be embarrassed to lose to, right? He's lost some very quality opposition on the amateur scene. Brian Battle, Dalton Rasta. He lost to William Knight, which is not a great loss, but I think that, if they ran that back, I would probably favor Brundage, but maybe not. Maybe that would still be close. In any case, you got Maximov. He loses that fight. He beats Cropshot, means nothing to me. Beats Lungi Ambula in a fight where he was getting tuned up like an old guitar, grabbed a guillotine and got the win. So again, he's kind of got that one round to pull something off. But if you look at his recent fights, guys, every fight has ended in round 1 or 2 since 2021 when he went to decision with Maximov. So basically, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights in a row, all end in the first or second round. You've got the same thing is true for Bo Nickel his whole career. It does seem to me like this is probably going to go under. However, what a scoop for the books it would be if this fight went over. So in any case, I feel like this is probably better to take the under than to lay the huge price on Nickel, but that's just my 2 cents. Shout out to the Arcana Dome there. Next up, guys, let's talk about a fight that's a little more closely lined. We've got Alexander, or you know what I should do actually? Let's do a quick roundup where we just talk about the odds that we've discussed so far. So I want to give you guys a little bit of context. I've realized we forgot to discuss what the odds were on these fights specifically. So first of all, we've got the main event, and these numbers are all courtesy of Fight Numbers. If you're interested in the product, if you're interested in the odds screen, what I've done is I've simply taken the best available prices based on the website, and I'm going to read those to you now. We've got Jamahal Hill listed plus 115 on BetMGM, taking on Alex Pereira, minus 126 right now on Pinnacle Sportsbook. Then we've got the co-main event of the evening, Yan Xiaonan, plus 370 underdog on DraftKings Sportsbook, and minus 485 or so on the Zhang Weili side. Meanwhile, Charles Oliveira plus 195 on Pinnacle Sportsbook, taking on minus 210 Arman Sarukian via Borgata Sports. Max Holloway checking in at a plus 138 underdog price on BetOnline compared to a minus 155 price on the Justin Gaethje side. That's available at Pinnacle Sportsbook. Then you've got Cody Brundage plus 1,200 over at Bet Rivers and Unibet, taking on the minus 2,000 favorite Bo Nickel. That's available over at BetMGM. And that under I was discussing is minus 300 on FanDuel Sportsbook. So there you have it, guys. A lot of information packed in a short amount of time, but just giving you guys a little screenshot, a little snippet of the odds. And that's all courtesy of Fight Numbers. If you're looking to get involved yourself, if you want access to those same lines that I'm reading off from the best available numbers on the market, then you can go to Fight Numbers, use promo code Liam. Easy way to support the show, easy way to support some good guys doing some good work in the community. And the site keeps growing every day. Shout out to John Kelly, continues to put in the work to grow the site, but also to improve it constantly. Already added a prop finder tool that I've been having a lot of value from as well. Was able to find a prop earlier that I sent to the Patreon, and I was able to find the best available price using the prop finder tool. So Fight Numbers, information down in the description box below if you're looking for a way to invest in your handicapping. Shout out to Austin, says best on YouTube. Thank you for the solid work. It's always my pleasure. It's an honor to be here talking to you guys on a fight week like this. I know that you guys have a lot of options. There's going to be a lot of people that aren't in the trenches every week that are doing content this week. There's going to be a lot of people that maybe, you don't come to expect with these takes every week, doing the free content every week. And that's what we're always going to do. I love the fights. It's my blessing and my honor to be here. So I appreciate you guys making the time. I appreciate everybody who rocks with us live. I appreciate the people that show up a little bit later on. I appreciate the people that watch this on the rewind. So thank you to all you guys. Shout out to my guy Saul as well. Been cooking the books on Twitter. Shout out to Saul Fine, brother from another guy who's just on his way in the space, continuing to learn, continuing to gain knowledge. Been on the other side of the counter, and really good insights as well. Came on the show trying to say, hey guys, maybe don't take the Bill Algeo plunge, right? Maybe it's Kyle Nelson fight week. Nelson then comes on through. Excellent job from him. So great call, Saul. And when you want to know in advance what the bookmaker is going to need, you better call Saul, brother. Shout out to Future MMA as well in the chat. Says, I am from Serbia. I know Rakic. He is so strong. If he see that he can't strike with Yuri, he will finish him brutally on the ground. Thank you, Liam. You're the best, says Future MMA. So appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate the support, gentlemen. And without further ado, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Yuri Prochazka taking on Alexander Rakic. And could I tell you guys the truth? I have no idea who to pick in this fight. I think it's a fantastic fight. I think it's a very difficult fight to call. And, when you look at Yuri Prochazka, he's a guy that had a very serious shoulder injury, had to vacate the title, came back, tried to reclaim that against Alex Pereira, the guy who's going to be headlining this card. Now we've seen Yuri slip off the pay-per-view portion of the event, right? And on the other side, Alexander Rakic, now he doesn't have that same buffer fight, right? You just saw a fight where Yuri Prochazka had a lot of success. He won some exchanges. He also took some damage to his legs. He got knocked out, right? Finished with strikes, which is something that has not been a habit throughout his career. He's always shown that great durability, a resilience, a warrior spirit, a willingness to go through the fire and keep fighting and keep pushing. And when you look at a guy like Rakic on the other side, I've always thought that Rakic had real potential in the division. The reason I felt that way is because he's got the huge open side head kicks, these big knockouts. He goes out there and finds a way to hurt people. And also, he's just found a way to eke out these close decisions at times, find a way to win, get a takedown, use some low kicks, right? Mix it up, get a little bit more volume off than the opponent. But in a fight like this, man, I just feel like we're going to see some crazy volatility, man. When you look at Yuri Prochazka, he invites risk. He creates chaos. And I think that Alexander Rakic is not as comfortable with the chaotic fight. I do think he's capable of winning it. This is light heavyweight. He's got huge power. He's very strong physically. He's got an ability to mix in some takedowns potentially. But when you see Yuri, nothing he does is traditional. Not on the feet, not on the ground, but he does find a way to just will himself to these positions, right? He does find a way to end up reversing people. He does find a way to be very creative in all positions, whether it's standing, whether it's on the ground. And it does make him difficult to read. There's a lot of fighters where you can start to find their tells. You can start to see exactly what they want to do. They become very predictable. And, Alex Pereira just has the kind of power where he can throw one left hook, like kind of throw it away, bing, and just kill somebody with it, right? That's just kind of what he does. And when you look at a guy, in this fight, like Yuri, who's coming off that knockout loss, could it make him more tepid? Could it make him a little bit less willing to engage? I just don't see that with Yuri, right? Like I feel like Yuri would have kept fighting that night. He would have just got back up and kept going. And he respected the referee's decision, but he also is a guy that's willing to go out on his shield. He's willing to get put out brutally. He's a guy that embraces that. And I think Rakic is a guy who plays it a little bit safer at times. If you look at his career, I've noted the fact he's able to go out there and win some of those decisions, but we've also seen he's lost some decisions. Split decision to Volkan Ozdemir, close fight, left it within the hands of the judges. He beat Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith, both fine wins, but again, he hasn't won a fight in the UFC since 2021. So a lot of people want to shit on Yuri because he doesn't have very much UFC experience. However, basically, the bulk of his career has taken place in the absence of Alexander Rakic. He has not been as active And Yuri is also the younger fighter here, not by a huge margin. He's 31 compared to 32 years of age here for Rakic. So pretty negligible difference. But I always talk about the fact that I look for these younger fighters with more professional experience. And unfortunately, we've got competing angles here, right? Because on the one hand, I always talk about you got a fighter coming off a title loss. Oftentimes you can see a real letdown spot in their next fight. However, on the other side, you've got the younger fighter with more professional experience, championship level fights all over the world. He's fought the highest level of guys in Yuri Prohaska. And I think that he could go out there and win this fight. He could do it dominantly. I also think he could get embarrassed in this fight. He could get audited for his skills. I think Yuri's a guy that can go out there and, beat anybody and lose to anybody because he invites so much risk. And so when you get plus money on a guy like that, I think it's always something you have to consider strongly. However, I respect that, this line hasn't moved very much with a lot of public money, I would assume, coming in on the Yuri Prohaska side. Maybe they're fading him because he lost his last fight and he burnt people against Alex. But when I think about this fight, I just say to myself, man, you got a guy who's been more active, who's already had that fight to come back from, an injury. And I feel like Yuri Prohaska is dangerous in every phase of the fight, just like Alexander Rakic. So for me, at the plus money, I lean towards Yuri Prohaska, but I don't think it's an easy fight to call. I don't agree with the people that write off Rakic and think that he's not a great fighter. I think he is a great fighter, but I think that he kind of needs to show us something inside the octagon. Hurt versus Blachowicz last time out. Weird circumstance, but also it's part of the record, right? If you had bet on him there, you lost the money, right? They're not going to write you an IOU or an I'm so sorry he got hurt refund. So when you look, I just think that Yuri is a guy that typically has shown great durability and a willingness to push through the fire. Yes, he can get hurt, but he typically has great recoverability. And maybe Rakic is the guy that can make him pay for that, put him away. I do kind of lean towards the unders, towards the fight not to go. I think both these guys capable of finishing. I think both these guys capable of being finished. So for me, violent fight, brutal, explosive, great way to kick off a pay-per-view and kind of lead people in there. So yeah, give me Yuri Prohaska very hesitantly. And I'm going to have to tape this one a little bit more overnight, try and get a better feel for it. But Yuri for me is a really fun fighter and a guy I really like and respect. Cashed me a huge bet against Glover Teixeira. So he'll always hold a place in my heart, but haven't always got his fights right either. A couple times I did try to fade him with underdogs in the UFC. And this time, you got a favorite in Alexander Rakic. So no real interest for me from a betting standpoint, except maybe the under or the fight not to go. And going back to the fight numbers angle here, we got plus 100 even money on Yuri Prohaska. That's available at Borgata Sports. And you've got a minus 115 comeback on Alexander Rakic, bet online. So that is the odds for the prelim headliner. And without further ado, let's move into the next fight where we've got the pride of New York, Aljamain Sterling, taking on Calvin Kattar. I'm half kidding. He's moved to Vegas now for most of his fight camps and those kind of things. But obviously we still, represent for Aljamain. We still appreciate Aljamain and everything he's done for the great state of New York. But he's got the Boston finisher on the other side, Calvin Kattar, a guy who's not been kind to the great state of New York. If you look historically, absolutely brutally took out Shane Burgos in a back and forth affair, a close fight, a fight where you saw the mettle of both guys tested, and Shane Burgos is a great fighter. But when you talk about the things that really compromised his durability for a while, I think you have to look at that Calvin Kattar fight and the damage he took on the counter, his willingness to stand in the pocket and eat shots. Calvin Kattar is an explosive boxer. He's got real power. He's got explosive strikes. He's a violent dude in the cage. He beat the absolute tar out of Giga Chikadze, cashed me a big ticket at plus 200. So got nothing but respect for Calvin Kattar. However, we got to talk about the fact he's coming back off of an injury. We got to talk about the fact that, this line opened up closer to pick him. Now it's steamed out. Aljamain Sterling, a lot of favorite love this week. He's getting bet up. And I got a shout out to Alja because he did like my tweet on X today, where I talked about his ability to, switch it up when he's on the back. He actually fell off the side, not really fell off, but like invited himself to fall over the side so he could get a deeper cinch on a rear naked choke grip, head and arm. And people were like, how did he finish that from full guard? man, it's a really tight choke. And Aljo is somebody I steal from, right? I love his game from the top position. His jiu-jitsu is brilliant. His ability to take the back. He's a fantastic grappler for any division in the UFC. But his wrestling was at the Division 3 level. He was not the best or most prolific wrestler either at the UFC level or in the college wrestling ranks. So he's a great wrestler, but not a wrestler that is going to be lights out against everybody at the top of the division. And you look at Calvin Kattar, and there's very limited wrestling tape from him in the UFC. What we have seen is he was able to take down Giga Chikadze and beat him up a little bit against the fence, bully him a little bit, use his American wrestling against that Georgian kickboxing, and kind of throw him around, use his physicality, use his strength, use his experience, his veteran savvy. And he's kind of defending his spot here, right? Calvin Kattar is the guy who's experienced in the featherweight division. He's fought a who's who. He's fought a very serious level of competition throughout his career, beaten a lot of very quality fighters along the way. But he is a guy that is, coming off an injury, right? So he did have an ACL tear. He is a 36-year-old, I believe. He's not a young man in this game, but he's a dangerous featherweight. He's a violent guy. He's got bad intentions. He shows up well prepared for his fights, with the cardio, with the conditioning, with the willingness to fight tough and stay in there. So putting away Calvin Kattar, I mean, we saw Max Holloway light this guy up like a Christmas tree, and he came back and took Giga Chikadze's lunch money. So I think that the recoverability of Kattar is phenomenal and hard to ignore. And we've seen him before come out and give somebody some humble pie. He's that kind of guy. And Aljo is a very dangerous guy. But if he's not getting takedowns in this fight, I think there is a big power gap between these two on the feet. Maybe that's going to look different. We've got Aljo now at 145 pounds, right? Not cutting as much weight, going to be able to sit down on his shots a little bit more. But do you really want to sit down on your shots with Calvin Kattar, who's a great counter boxer, who's got great rhythm, who can move, flow in the pocket, who's been very dangerous as an underdog as well? It just seems to me like this is a fight that's very volatile. And, again, I'm probably leaning towards the fight not to go the distance here. I think there's a path to finish for both guys that's very obvious, right? Aljamain Sterling can finish anybody if he gets their back, especially when they're both dry. I mean, look at Corey Sandhagen, top guy in the bantamweight division. Aljamain took his back and choked him in less than 2 minutes. Said, get out of here, right? What's up, nerd? But then you look at, some other fights, right? He wasn't able to get O'Malley down. He got blasted out of there, got finished. Got badly compromised. And O'Malley's a sniper. O'Malley's a great fighter. But we just saw Cheeto Vera take an absolute mollywhopping from him. Cheeto's got an all-time legendary chin, but Aljo doesn't, right? We've seen him knocked out by Marlon Moraes, Magic. Other guys have survived that Magic Marlon Moraes, onslaught, that big shot, those big damaging strikes that he lands. And Aljo wasn't able to do that. And I'm not taking anything away from Aljo. He's a great fighter. But it's an unknown how he's going to respond to the big strikes of Calvin Kattar at 145 pounds. It's an unknown how Calvin Kattar is going to look coming back from this surgery on his knee. So for me, unknown should push the line a little bit closer to 50-50. I understand the argument that the guy with the wrestling and the grappling upside is Aljamain Sterling, and I agree with that. I think if somebody's having offensive wrestling and grappling success, it's Aljamain Sterling. But I think what we have seen from Kattar defensively against Fishgold in the grappling, for example, looked sensational. He did a very good job in that fight, balancing, moving, single legs, all this stuff. And so it could go different here, right? Especially on a surgically repaired knee, it could look very different. But when I'm looking, I just say to myself, man, this is a fight where Kattar is definitely a live dog in my view, because he's got knockout power and he's a really sensational boxer. He's got good uppercuts. And that's the other thing is Shane Burgos kind of got rocked with a 1-2, and he went to shoot a takedown and almost got, like if he was wearing shoes, he would have got uppercutted out of his shoes. And we have nothing but respect for Shane Burgos, literally the pride of Section 9, where I come from, where I represent. We have nothing but love for Shane Burgos, but you just got to call it like an analyst, like you see it. And he got uppercutted so hard by Calvin Kattar. That was a long time ago. Calvin Kattar is a vet. Calvin Kattar's been around a long time, man. He's been holding it down in this featherweight division. I don't think he's ready to give it all up. I don't think he's a pushover at all. So I think it's going to be a brutal welcoming for Aljamain Sterling. And I think he can absolutely win this fight via submission. But I think if he's not getting this fight to the ground, it is going to be a tough fight for him. And I know people think he can go out there and volume Kattar on the feet. Maybe that's true. I think he should try and use his leg kicks. Kattar was stifled by the leg kicks of Moicano back in the day. But when you look Kattar just builds and builds into these fights, man. And by rounds 2 and rounds 3, he starts cooking on a lot of guys and starts landing big elbows and starts landing big shots and starts cutting people's faces. And I just don't know that Aljo will like those damaging shots if he's getting hit with them. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of opportunities. And I think he's got his sights set on another title. And if he realizes in this fight, hey, maybe that's not an opportunity, maybe he goes back to 135, or maybe he calls it a career. This is a guy who said, hey, I want to retire young, and I always thought, that was a reason for me to be skeptical betting him once he got that title. And I didn't have Sean O'Malley tickets at plus 200. I regret that to this day, but I did have the sense that God gave geese. I told people you cannot go lay, minus 250 against an O'Malley in Boston. And we saw why that was the case. Now you've got a Boston guy, the Boston finisher, Calvin Kattar. And maybe Aljo exacts his revenge on Boston. Maybe he goes out there and gets one back. Comeuppance for New York. But maybe Boston has one over on him right now. And maybe the nightmares of that fight, right? The hesitation from that fight, the reminder of the Marlon Moraes result, these struggles he's had with the durability. He's never had a problem with skills, but Petr Yan was lighting him up with damage. And, these other guys, Marlon Moraes lit him up with damage and finished him badly. Very brutal knockout. We saw what O'Malley did to him, cut his face badly, hurt him, cut him, put him down. And these are guys that are at 135 pounds, very talented guys, great fighters. They're 135-pound fighters. And now at 145 pounds, Calvin's not a small guy. He's a big hitter. He's a top 10 fighter. And I don't think anybody should take him lightly, period, point blank, nobody. So I think that this fight more than likely ends inside the distance. I think Kattar by knockout, Aljamain by sub or TKO on the mat, but probably the sub if he gets it. And we have seen Aljo good ground and pound, right? He can roll that wrist. If he gets that back mount with you bellied out, he can absolutely beat you up. It doesn't matter who you are. But again, that's takedown contingent. If he's not getting takedowns here, I think it's going to be a whole different ball game. So yeah, great fight, fascinating, great matchmaking, all the same plaudits I give to this fight. Cheers. We'll take a sip of the coffee and it's on to the next one. Speaking of the next one, we've got the latest addition to the UFC roster, man. Kayla Harrison finally makes her way over to the big show. She is just 33 years of age coming into this bout, taking on the 42-year-old legend of the Octagon, Holly, the Preacher's daughter, Holm. Holly Holm is 8-6 in the UFC, guys. Great fighter. However, she's been on hard times lately. You look at that Mayra Bueno Silva result. Obviously did not go her way. She got ninja choked. The result was overturned. Mayra tested positive, I think, for ADHD medication or some kind of performance-enhancing drug. But in any case, you look at the next fight on her resume. She beat Yana Santos via unanimous decision. Not really a fight that blew anybody's hair back. She lost to Ketlin Vieira via split decision. I cashed in big on Ketlin Vieira there, big plus money. And that was a fight where I just said, like, man, Ketlin is like a top 10 girl in the division. She can go out there and compete physically with Holm in the striking, in the grappling. She's a judo black belt, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. She just checked a lot of boxes for me. And so I bet Ketlin pretty big there. And guys, it was such a close fight. She barely eked it out, but I did think she deserved the win that night. Thought it was super close. Then you look at the Irene Aldana fight. Gosh, she absolutely audited Irene Aldana. That should have told us everything we needed to know for that fight with Amanda Nunes, but I convinced myself Amanda Nunes retirement, so she's not going to win. Unfortunately, she beat her ass so bad, and Irene Aldana wanted no part of it. So you look at the Raquel Pennington fight. Holly Holm beat the current champion of this division, win via unanimous decision. Did she do it once? She did it twice. First time via split decision back in 2015. Then she beat her in January of 2020. So Holly Holm has wins, 2 of them over the current UFC champion. But at 42 years of age, what is it all worth? Can she get back to that title run? I think that the way that Holly Holm gets to a title fight in the UFC is if she beats Kayla Harrison. I think that's her only chance. I think for Kayla Harrison, she is going to be a prized product in the UFC. She's 16-1. She has an Olympic pedigree. She is an excellent fighter. And you look at her skills, there's not a lot you could take away from her. 6 wins via knockout, 6 wins via submission. 4 wins via decision for Kayla Harrison. And only 1 loss via decision against the very talented Larissa Pacheco. She bounced back with a win over UFC washout Aspen Ladd, with all due respect. She also has wins over Marina Maktakina, Taylor Guardado, who I believe I parlayed her up against Taylor Guardado, who she finished with an armbar in the second round. She beat Cindy Dendois. So she has some recognizable-ish names on her resume. She does have the wins, of course, over Larissa Pacheco as well. So she lost her in the most recent iteration. However, she did beat Pacheco twice back in the day. But I would say that, she kind of relied on a lot of control, on a lot of takedowns, and not really that much damage against Pacheco. And she did okay on the feet, but I do think her striking is a little bit rigid. And I think the quality of competition, her ability to physically outmaneuver girls and out hustle and muscle girls has been a huge difference maker. And maybe she's able to do all those same things at 135 pounds. But I do think it's asking, a lot of her, right? Like, I'm just going to refer to her Tapology record and see if I could find this. She had a judo match in 2016 at the Olympic Games, and the weight class, guys, was 172 pounds. So Kayla Harrison used to compete in judo in the Olympics at 172 pounds. And now you're talking about cutting to 135 pounds, and she's not a spring chicken, right? She's not old by any means, but she is, after all, 33 years of age. So at 33 years of age, she's going to cut down to 135 pounds when she was competing in judo in the Olympics in 2016 at 172 pounds. I mean, maybe, but it just seems unlikely to me that she could do that without compromising something. She looks physically great. The muscles look great, but I feel like she's going to have to drain all the water out of her body. She's going to have a great rehydration. She's going to have to make sure that she doesn't gas out in this fight. And I think that when you look at Holly Holm, she's not a great grappler, right? And she made some critical mistakes against Mayra Bueno Silva. But when you look at the Mayra Bueno Silva fight, the thing that stood out to me there was she was kind of getting lit up on the feet. So then she had to force the grappling with Mayra. And Mayra is a dangerous submission grappler. For all of her faults, she's very dangerous. So when I'm looking at this fight, I say to myself, man, Holly Holm, a lot of UFC experience, a lot of championship level experience. And you look at the girls that she's lost to in the UFC. Let's just go through the resume, right? Because obviously the result against Mayra was overturned, but let's just say she gets submitted by Mayra Bueno Silva in a fight where, Mayra tests positive, goes on to fight for the title next and loses a competitive fight to somebody that Holly Holm had beaten, right? But Yana Santos, she got the win over her, lost to Ketlen Vieira, like we mentioned. She lost to Amanda Nunes. She was an underdog in that fight. She lost to Chris Cyborg. She was an underdog in that fight. And, that's justifiable, right? Like, you just look at those losses and you say to yourself, man, that kind of makes sense, right? Then she loses to Ketlen Vieira. She was heavily favored to win that fight, and it was extremely close. So otherwise, she lost as a favorite against Mayra Bueno Silva, and now she's a plus 350 underdog against Kayla Harrison, who, I do think has some real skills. She can wrestle the double legs. She can use her judo to get takedowns upper body. But I think against Holly Holm, that's going to be very difficult, right? Ronda Rousey, what did she struggle with? The clinch breaking, the boxing mechanics, where she just knows how to instinctually move her feet and then get a hold of people, and move them around a little bit in the clinch. So I don't think she's easy to hit with judo type takedowns. I think you'd actually have to wrestle her a little bit more traditionally to try and get her to the ground, put two legs together. She's a taller woman, but I think that at distance in this fight, despite being 42 years of age, I think Holly's going to be the more fluid striker of the two. I don't know that she has the same pop that she used to, but I think that if she's able to get high kicks up there, she could potentially land. I do think that Kayla Harrison does put, her hands in the wrong positions at times. I do think she's very dangerous from the top position in some fights, but I think in other fights we see she's a little bit more complacent. And I think in the Pacheco fight, she was trying to just hold on for portions of that fight and get some respite and get some rest. And Pacheco's obviously a very good fighter, but I just think that when you look at that fight, she was a minus 700 favorite, and she kind of fumbled the bag there in a fight that she could have won. She looked like she had the skills to win. She's beaten the girl 2 times before, and the pressure kind of got to her. She's never fought on a stage like this. She's fought at the Olympics in judo. She's fought in the PFL. So she's done a lot of things to build herself up to this point. She's got a lot of great experience. But you look at Holly Holm, she's fought on the biggest cards. She's gotten the biggest upset in UFC history. There's not a lot that you could throw at her that she's never seen before. And so I think she might get brutally finished in this fight if it just gets taken to the ground over and over. If Kayla makes weight, no problem. All these things. But if those things don't happen, if those don't materialize, I think Holly Holm represents a live underdog here, despite her age. It's women's MMA. We saw Jermaine Durand and me, was a couple of strikes away from beating Norma Dumont, right? Like Norma Dumont did take her down and did dominate the grappling positions. However, she did almost no damage from the top position. So if you had seen Jermaine get to the top position and land 10 damaging shots, she could have won that round, could have won that fight. And I think that you look at Holly Holm in this fight, and I think she's going to go out there and fight hard for your money. I think she's putting in a real training camp. She's got Chris Justino Cyborg in her camp installed at Jackson Wink MMA. Jackson Wink MMA is where John Jones trained. You think they don't have steroids there? I bet they do. Don't sue me. It's all love. It's all friendship. I hope she's on nuclear level steroids here, especially if I end up getting to the window with Holly Holm. But I could never lay minus 450 with Kayla Harrison in this kind of situation, just because she's got a lot to prove to me at the UFC level. She's got all the skills on paper, and she looks great on a lot of the tape, but some of the tape looks a little sketchy to me. A lot of the opponents look very average to me, and Holly Holm has fought and beaten some of the best, and she's lost to some of the best, but she's still out here doing the damn thing, staying active. So I feel like Holly Holm could win this fight, surprise people, and I just think it's going to be a great scrap. I think that Holly could also get killed. So for me, the things that were interesting in this fight were maybe the fight not to go the distance. Holly Holm as the side on the money line. That's the way I'm kind of seeing this fight break down. But I'm going to do a little more tape, a little more due diligence. I want to see what Holly Holm's wrestling and grappling looks like to double legs. But definitely Kayla looks like she's in fantastic shape. Definitely Kayla looks like she's very muscular. But the one thing about muscle, guys, is it requires a lot of oxygen. And I do think that if you're talking about how you tire out, cutting a lot of weight with a ton of musculature on your body, it's like one of the number one ways to gas out faster in mixed martial arts fights. And Holly Holm is a much more natural 135 pounder, right? She's been doing this her whole career. She went up to 145 as more of a gag, as more of a favor for the UFC. Whereas she's a big enough girl, she's tall, she's long, but she can make 135. She's been doing it her whole career. So I feel like 135 advantage Holly Holm. If this was at 145, I feel like I would, think a little bit better of Kayla Harrison. But I also think there's just some more unknowns introduced by the weight class. There's some unknowns with, UFC jitters, UFC debutante in a huge card like this. I just think there's a lot of ways that this could go a little bit sour for the big parlay backers out there on the Kayla Harrison side. But great show. I'm really excited to see this one play out. And, as Holly Holm fights go, this is about as exciting as they get on paper and hopefully in the cage as well. So looking forward to seeing those two ladies scrap it out, and we'll figure out, if those PFL titles are the same, if they hit the same in the UFC, or if Holly Holm's got one more in her. She had the biggest upset in UFC history against Ronda Rousey, against another judo medalist. Does she have one more to pull out of the bag? We'll have to find out on Saturday night. We are going to go a little bit faster through this next fight where we've got Sadiq Youssef. And Sadiq Youssef is Super Sadiq. He went out there last time, dropped a competitive fight against Edson Barboza. He also lost to Arnold Allen. And the thing that concerned me in both of those unanimous decision losses is that he was nearly finished. He got badly hurt, badly rocked, badly compromised in both of those fights. You look back in his earlier career, he was slammed and knocked out via strikes on the ground via Luis Gomez in 2017. So a couple times now we've seen the chin flashes, really scary stuff for Sadiq Youssef. And the Mike Davis fight, he also took some big shots, but he was able to, do a great job dealing with them. So you look at this fight on paper, I worry a little bit about the fact that this is like a 6-month turnaround for Sadiq after a brutal back and forth war where he took a ton of damage against Edson Barboza over the course of those brutal 5 rounds. As for Diego Lopes, right now, he's got a ton of momentum in the division, right? 2 straight wins, a loss to Movsar Evloev that was way more competitive than people expected. I actually bet Diego Lopes plus 680 in that fight. And the reason I did that was because it was a huge money line in a men's MMA fight in a competitive division like featherweight. And I saw a guy in Diego Lopes who wanted the opportunity, who fought a guy who's extremely dangerous in Joanderson Brito and never backed down, never took a backward step, kept getting in his face, kept trying to submit him. By the way, put Joanderson in danger several times. And Joanderson's a great grappler in his own right. So I think you look at this guy, Diego Lopes, and, he's very, very skilled at the things that he's good at. He takes a lot of risks. He is a guy that's a chancer. He doesn't have the best process, as people like to say in the mixed martial arts world. But one thing I always talk about is I like these guys that are dangerous. I like these guys that can go out there and finish fights. And I think that Diego Lopes, whether it's on the feet or on the ground, he's extremely live to finish a fight. He has 21 wins inside the distance, 2 losses via knockout. He puts himself on the line. So Sadiq Yusuff could absolutely knock him out in this fight. We look at Sadiq Yusuff. He has 6 wins by knockout, only 1 loss via knockout. He's 1-0 career to the submission. But again, 1-0 career to the submission. And when you look at the on-paper results here, Diego Lopes is 12-0 career to the submission. He's a fantastic submission grappler. He has an ability, to go out there and submit high-level black belts like Gavin Tucker. We've seen that. Now, he's also shown an ability to go have competitive, grappling matches with some guys on the regional scene. So he's not lights out in that regard, but I do think his confidence is up. I think that his experience is rounding out. He's a young guy, with more professional experience. It's something I always talk about. 29 years of age here for Diego Lopes, 30 going on 31 for Super Sadiq Yusuff, the ranked fighter here. And you've got a ranked fighter who's an underdog in this matchup. I think that's a little bit interesting as well. When I look at Diego Lopes, he's a guy that could definitely get exposed. He could get knocked out. He could be outworked to a decision, right? Poor record in decisions, just 2-4 in his career to the decision, looking at 6-2 on the other side for Sadiq Yusuff. But I'm getting grief in the chat for picking the jiu-jitsu guy in Diego Lopes. But the thing is, man, I'm actually feeling like it's going to be Diego Lopes by knockout in this fight. I think that Sadiq has had his chin tested. And the fact that he was able to survive against Barboza, I think is going to give people confidence. But I think the damage may be lasting from that fight. And I think that Lopez, his confidence, his exuberance, his willingness to get in there and throw right away from the opening bell, and his pressure could all be things that get to Sadiq. And Sadiq could definitely counter him, could knock him out, could starch him. He's a dangerous fighter. Man, he's a scary guy to deal with inside the octagon. But we've seen other guys go out there and keep it close with him. And you just look at the wins for Sadiq Yusuff. I know people want to discredit some of the wins, for Diego Lopes, but the wins for Sadiq Yusuff are Dylan Tuke, good win, fine win. Mike Davis, Mike was, I believe, cutting to featherweight at the time. Let me just check that. Yeah, that was a featherweight bout. And Mike Davis is obviously massive. So I think that we, would have to see a little bit more from there, to know if this was at 155, how does that fight go, differently? I think maybe Mike Davis could take him out, but also the leg kicks from Sadiq are important. He definitely could go, throw some leg kicks and get to a guy like Diego Lopes, but I just think Lopes is tough. I think he's willing to walk through that stuff. And then you look at some of these other fights, man. Sadiq Yusuff against Gabriel Benitez, win age like milk. Shaman Moraes, win age like milk. Suman Mokhtarian, win age like milk. Andre Fili, decent win, but again, not a great win on paper, based on where Andre's kind of at in his career. He's been a little bit up and down in his recent performances, especially, and he's been finished in a couple of these fights. So I just feel like Diego Lopes is a little bit more durable, a little bit more willing and able to take damage. And I think on this 2-fight win streak, the younger guy with more professional experience, I think he's going to go out there and get the win and kind of build himself into more of a UFC star. But maybe the hype train gets derailed. Sadiq Yusuff, great fighter, very solid guy. But I thought the Edson fight was a perfect opportunity for Sadiq to use his grappling, use his wrestling, take a big step forward in his career. And instead, he wasn't able to do that. He put on a fight of the year type war, but I think he spent some of his durability trying to do so. And I think Edson was just content to take the decision there and move on with his life. But Diego Lopes ain't content with a decision, man. He's trying to kill you for the duration of the 15 minutes. If you could survive that storm, my hat's off to you. But I think Diego Lopes is a dangerous guy right now. I think his confidence is at an all-time high. And I thought that there's a world in which, based on the criteria, you could score that fight with Movsar, a couple rounds for, our guy Diego Lopes. And again, I thought rightful winner Movsar Evloev, but you can understand how judges got to him. He's throwing stuff off his back the whole time. He's beating you up. He's cutting you. He's going for submissions. He's not a guy that's very complacent in his fight. So yeah, he might be in the guard, but he's in the guard looking for submissions constantly, looking to create damage. I think he's just a violent, capable individual. So not a guy that I like standing in front of. And especially after what he did to Pat Sabatini, never let the grappling exchanges get started. And Gavin Tucker wanted to grapple, man. He had that BJJ black belt. He's got great smothering top pressure. He didn't want to exchange with him on the feet. And he got taken down he got into that submission exchange and never got out of it, right? A dilemma, triangle armbar. If you try and escape one, you get put deeper into the other. Brutal stuff. So I really respect the game of both these guys. But give me Diego Lopes as just the more dangerous guy who's coming right now. And I think that Sadiq Youssef has to figure a couple of things out. He's an older guy who doesn't have the same amount of experience as a guy like Lopes. And he trains at a great gym, Lloyd Irvin guy. But I think that when you look at Lopes, man, he's on insane juice. He looks jacked. He looks very dangerous. And again, he looks super confident. Next up, guys, we've got Jalen the Tarantula Turner taking on Hinata Moicano. And this feels like a tale of two fights for me because, the really obvious side here, the play that I think everybody is going to be on is Jalen Turner via knockout, Jalen Turner round one. And I think that's very possible. But I just want to say, guys, Jalen Turner was plus 108 against Uros Medic, and Uros Medic cannot grapple. So I had the sub prop. I had him plus 108 in that fight. I had him against Brad Riddell, massively at minus 115. He way outsized Brad Riddell, like way bigger than him. And Brad Riddell can't grapple. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. He can wrestle. He cannot grapple on this level. With a guy like Jalen Turner, a guy who's so lengthy, a guy who's got these long limbs, it was just always a disaster for Brad. I had the fight not to go the distance. I had Jalen Turner money line. I had Jalen Turner by sub. I had Jalen Turner sub round one. I saw that one very clearly. Right, I've been a very good Jalen Turner bettor over time, and I stayed off when he fought Gamrot. I stayed off when he fought Hooker. So some discipline there. The Bobby Green fight, I thought Bobby was a live underdog coming into that fight, and Jalen Turner absolutely starched him. Right, just came out there and killed him. And unfortunately, guys, it was one of the worst late stoppages you'll see in the UFC, right? Like you just saw so much unnecessary damage. You saw, so much wear and tear. And I think that Bobby Green maybe will never be the same. And we'll talk about that after. But I look at this and I say, man, Jalen Turner's a guy that let's just, rewind the tape. Right, he misses weight for the Dan Hooker fight. Beat the absolute tar out of Dan Hooker. But then he drops a close split decision in that fight by getting out-wrestled and out-grappled by Dan Hooker. I mean, Dan Hooker's taken down some guys, but that for me is not a great look for a guy who's so talented in the wrestling and grappling like Turner. That showed me, man, this guy can still get tired. He can get fatigued. He can get taken down. We've seen it against Gamrot. We've seen it against Dan Hooker. He can get put in bad positions, man. Matt Frevola. Let's go back in the record because Matt Frevola never gets the respect he deserves as a wrestler, as a grappler. He summarily audited Jalen Turner's ground game back in the day. If you look in 2019, guys, April of 2019, Matt Frevola absolutely audited the game of Jalen Turner. And the way that he did that was by taking him to the ground and passing his guard and then doing it again and doing it again. I think Jalen Turner is a good fighter. I think he's a talented fighter, but he's a little bit of a weight bully. He cuts a lot of weight, I feel, to make, this class at lightweight, right? He missed that weight against Dan Hooker. It still wasn't enough, right? So I think that when you look at that fight with Bobby Green, it showed. You give him a guy who's old, slow, not supposed to be in there with him. He could still go out there and deliver, get a big shot off. But let's not forget, Bobby Green, prior to that fight with Jalen Turner, had just knocked out Grant Dawson with one shot. So we didn't get to see him tested at all in that fight. He beat Tony Ferguson, who hasn't won a fight in years in the UFC. He had a no contest accidental head clash with Jared Gordon that people forget about, but Jared was winning that fight in the boxing until they clashed heads, in my humble opinion. I also had a bet on Jared Gordon plus 200 in that fight. And when you look, Drew Dober knocked him out brutally with a left hook. So Islam Makhachev finishes him via TKO in the first round. This is his result since 2022. He beat Nasrat Hakparas, who was not a good wrestler or grappler. And honestly, his best skill is boxing, and he was going against Bobby Green. That story ends one way. Bobby Green gave him the vet lesson, tour of the octagon. I bet several units on Bobby. But now we're looking at a guy in Jalen Turner who his big wins in the UFC are Bobby Green in the twilight of his career, but still a respectable win. Brad Riddell, who I don't know if he's actively competing in mixed martial arts. Jamie Malarkey, who got knocked out by a featherweight on short notice, and Muhammad Naimov. Uros Medic, who just got summarily outgrappled and exposed by Murtabek Oralbai, and the welterweight experiment got a little bit derailed. Brock Weaver, who did not last very long in the UFC. Josh Kulabau, who is a featherweight, who's, again, coming off a loss to a UFC debutant. Matt Favola beat him. Vicente Luque brutally knocked him out in the first round, and he beat Callan Potter. So Jalen Turner has all the upside in the world. He's got all the potential in the world. He's got knockout ability. He's got great skills in all positions. He's a lethal finisher with my favorite move, that guillotine, that front headlock series. He's got long limbs to pull it off. So I like and respect Jalen Turner a ton. If you got in at the early numbers, you beat the market here. Great on Jalen Turner. But now let's talk about the downside with Jalen Turner. If you look at Jalen Turner's results in the UFC, he is 7-2 as a favorite for a 15.7% ROI. But again, we're talking about a guy who was an underdog to Uros Medic back in the day. So the market has now come around big time on Jalen Turner and his upside and his potential and his skills. But what have they also done over time? They've turned their back on a guy in Renato Moicano. And Moicano, as an underdog, 4-2 in the UFC for a 52.3% ROI. He's been an excellent underdog. And here's the other thing. These guys match up in a very weird way. And why do I say that? Because Jalen Turner, 4-0 career to the submission, never been submitted, and 4 wins via submission. Renato Moicano, 10 wins via submission. Just 1 loss via submission. So you look between these two guys, they are 14-1 career to the sub. They're both fantastic in those positions, hard to get out of there, and both have offense from those phases. Okay, I would give the credit, the advantage there to Renato Moicano. I think he's the better pure grappler between these two guys, and I think substantially so. Based on his record, I think the guys that Jalen Turner is submitting, while impressive, are not as impressive. Uros Medic, Brock Weaver, Brad Riddell. Yeah, just not as impressive quality of wins. And then Tuatus Saduskis, who is 2-6 on the regional scene. Those are all the submission wins for Jalen Turner. Meanwhile, Renato Moicano has submitted the likes of Alexander Hernandez. Also, Brad Riddell submitted him in the first round. Jai Herbert, Damir Hadzovic, Jai Herbert, who almost knocked out Ilya Taporia. You know what I'm saying? Cub Swanson, a black belt, submitted him in the very first round. Brian Ortega, he was whooping Brian Ortega's ass and then got submitted in the third round by him back in his run in the featherweight division. So you look at a guy in Renato Moicano, he used to cut a lot of weight. He got very good quality wins over Jeremy Stevens via decision, Calvin Kattar via decision, and Drew Dober via decision. Drew Dober obviously led him back into that fight, made some crazy mistakes, and Renato Moicano could get chinned here. But here's the thing I got to just level with you guys about. Renato Moicano can be chinned, but let's look at the quality of guys that have knocked him out. Chan Sung Jung, that was back when he was closer to his prime, 2019. He still had a lot of motivation. He still had the power in his hands. He caught him very early in that fight. First round knockout, bing, bang, boom, huge hands on him, knocked him out. Jose Aldo, hit him with huge body punches. I've reposted this clip before on Twitter. Unbelievable. Aldo says, F your body. Aldo's coming back, by the way. He's boxed professionally. The guy's a stud. And he threw a bunch of body shots at a guy who was cutting too much weight, and he put him, in trouble. And by the way, Moicano didn't even go down in that fight. He just started backing up and covering up, and they stopped the fight. And so when I'm looking at this, man, I'm saying, this is a guy in Moicano who's definitely got stuff going on outside the octagon. Shout out to my guy Rico 2029 in the chat. Says Money Moicano said on YouTube he came into the Dober fight with injuries, has not gotten himself better in this amount of time. He's fighting for opportunity and exposure. I mean, maybe so, but here's the other thing. You look at the record of Renato Moicano, and he is 0-3 career to the knockout, right? So Jalen Turner is an extremely dangerous striker. He's 10-3 career to the knockout, and he can absolutely win this fight via knockout against Renato Moicano. I think that's his number one path to victory. I think that's the majority of his win equity. So then you have to say how likely is Jalen Turner to knock out Moicano or to hurt him so bad he could submit it? And I think that that's a hard proposition to put at 70+%. Despite Jalen Turner being a great fighter. So that's what I'm looking at from a money line standpoint here. I'm looking at the fight numbers, best odds available on this fight. And what I'm seeing is +200 on Renato Moicano. That's at Bet Rivers, -225, market wide number. It looks like on the Jalen Turner side, as high as -250s out there. So yeah, I'm looking at this fight and I'm saying to myself, man, Renato Moicano could get knocked out brutally. That's definitely the path. But I think if these guys are grappling sober, if Renato Moicano is not completely rocked, I think he's the much more likely guy to win the fight via submission. And then here's the interesting quirk here. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with on this matchup from a trend standpoint, guys. You've got 8-1 to the decision, Renato Moicano in his career against Jalen Turner, 0-4 career to the decision. This guy has never won a decision in his career. Right? He's lost a couple split decisions. He's lost ones that were close that could have went his way, but he hasn't gotten them. The judges don't like that he gasses out. The judges don't like that he slows down and that he looks like a more diminished version of himself in rounds 2 and 3. And the reason he does is not because he's not conditioned. It's not because he doesn't work hard. It's not because he's not talented. It's because he's cutting a ton of weight. He's massive for the division, and it's hard to cut all that weight and keep fighting hard for 15 full minutes. So I think that Jalen Turner needs to get Renato Moicano out of there because, guys, look at RDA, okay? RDA put the beating of a lifetime on Renato Moicano, who took the fight on like 2 days' notice. They called him, hey, can you make 165 catch weight? 165 catch weight with RDA, who was probably juiced to the tits, and RDA went out there and beat him so bad. And, guys, he didn't quit. He did not go down. He never looked for the door. He never looked for a way out. The guys that have finished him are legit ass strikers. Rafael Fiziev, Jose fucking Aldo, the Korean Zombie. These are knockout strikers. So yeah, Jalen Turner's a knockout striker. He could absolutely go out there and knock this guy out. But you're being asked -250 to lay the privilege when you've got a guy in Renato Moicano who's beating other credible, solid fighters like, let's go through his resume. Recent run in the UFC, Drew Dober, Brad Riddell, Alexander Hernandez, Jai Herbert. These are all fringe guys. These are all guys that could be top 30, UFC lightweights pretty much. And he's going out there and beating them, and finishing a bunch of them. Went to decision with Dober, gutted it out again in some unfavorable circumstances. So I think that Renato Moicano could absolutely get chinned. But I think he's got a path to a submission. I think he's got a path to a decision. I think he's a live underdog on Saturday night. And I think Jalen Turner's a great fighter, a fantastic fighter, but he's a guy I want to bet at -115 chalk. He's a guy I want to bet at, +120, +108, +150. He's not a guy I want to lay big chalk prices on. That's just the way I roll. And that's what I've seen from Jalen Turner. I believe the ABCs say always bet on cardio. And I know that Renato Moicano on short notice can go 5 hard rounds with a UFC champion like RDA. And I think that Jalen Turner can't go 5 hard rounds. I think he almost got submitted by Dan Hooker, in a 3rd round. So for me, I think that Renato Moicano, lethal back takes, an ability to go out there and submit, and also an ability to go out there and get a decision. So give me Renato Moicano for the upset, guys. Next up, we got Jessica Andrade taking on Marina Rodriguez, and this is a fantastic fight. All I can give is flowers to Bate Estaca, Jessica Andrade. She is a legend of women's mixed martial arts when she goes out there and she puts on a great show. She throws heavy hands in the pocket. She can knock women out. She could sit them down with her power. She could pick them up and slam them, pile driver, right? She could go out there and slam women. She knocked out Rose Namajunas with a slam in a title fight. Unbelievable result. And she put it right back on the line, right? Takes a really unfavorable fight against Zhang Wei Li, turns it around a month later. She's the ultimate company woman. I think she's done so much for the UFC. She fought at 135. She fought at 125. She fought at 115. And she's really dangerous with her hands. She's got great pocket boxing. Shout out to Rico as well. Great point that he just mentioned. Andrade in the pocket is beautiful to watch. Couldn't agree more. And Greenbelt Warrior about that last fight says, everyone eager to fade Moicano with his podcast and whatnot hasn't really worked out. Yeah, man. I think a lot of people were on Dober last time. I think they had sour grapes. I think they feel burnt by Dober, and I think they want another taste trying to fade him with Jalen Turner, a dangerous guy, a knockout artist. But I think Renato Moicano is a smart guy. I think he's a dangerous fighter. And I think that he deserves respect for fighting a lot of really quality guys throughout his career. He's never ducked the challenge. So 34 years of age, maybe it all comes undone at this point. His durability has been his biggest flaw, but he's also a guy that went out there and outstruck Calvin Kattar, and y'all must have forgot about that. So I think that this is a guy who's very talented in all phases, and at his best, on his best night, he can win this fight inside the distance or via decision. So looking at the Andrade and Rodriguez fight, Marina Rodriguez, sneaky old, right? Approaching 37 years of age in this fight. And I think that her physicality has held her back sometimes at the highest levels. Amanda Hebos was able to go out there, take her down, put her on the ground for 3 minutes of the first round. And luckily she was able to knock her out before any other takedowns occurred in that fight. But you look at some other fights and she was getting taken down easily by Carla Esparza. But then what ended up happening, guys? Carla Esparza is pulling leg locks from the top position. She's going for straight ankle locks from top. And it was honestly baffling. It was very bizarre performance. So I think that when you look at, the women that have tried to wrestle with Andrade, they've largely had a ton of success. Or excuse me, with Rodriguez, they've largely had a ton of success. It's just that not a lot of women brought that threat to her. When you look, she was able to stuff the takedowns maybe from a Tisha Torres or a Jessica Aguilar. Cynthia Calvillo got the idea too late, right? In round 3, she decides, I'm going to take her to the ground and goes out there and gets a draw, a 10-8 round on top of this woman, beating her up, looking for the finish, putting her in danger, putting her in some bad positions. Then she loses a split decision to Carla Esparza, gets taken down, gets beat up. Then I'm looking at Amanda Hebos, right? She wins that fight via knockout, the Herb Dean special, lets her get KO'd twice, lets her get killed brutally on the feet. But then you look at the Michelle Waterson fight. I mean, Michelle Waterson passed her sell-by date for a long time. No disrespect. Mackenzie Dern, has been on hard times, has not proven to be the most effective at translating her grappling skills and credentials to the UFC level. Then you look at the Yan Xiaonan side, wins a split decision there. I didn't think she won that fight. I thought she lost that fight to Yan Xiaonan. I thought Yan Xiaonan was clearly the value side. I thought she deserved to win the fight on the night as well. And if you're looking at that, Marina Rodriguez could be putting up really bad numbers as a favorite, with that considered. As a dog, Marina Rodriguez has been very profitable. 3-0 as a dog for a 186% ROI. But like I mentioned, she's getting up there in age. How many more dog spots does she have left in her? And she's let people down often in that favorite capacity, right? She went out there as a big favorite against Amanda Lemos. And I bet against her bigly, guys. I really thought that was a great spot, to look to fade her. And that's what I did. And I was able to cash in. And I think that in this fight, I don't see why Jessica Andrade couldn't have a lot of the same success that Amanda Lemos had, because when you look at this girl, Jessica Andrade, she's got great power in her shots. She's got a willingness to come forward. She can get clipped. She can get knocked out. I think that's the big downside for her in this fight. That's the reason I wouldn't be super bullish laying chalk, but I think she should have a substantial advantage on the ground. I think she should be the more powerful striker of the two, though I think that's more competitive. And I also think she's the better wrestler of the two women. So for me, I just think that there's some upside on Jessica Andrade. She's a championship pedigree fighter. She's the younger woman by a substantial amount. She's got great experience in the UFC at all levels. And I just think that she's got more paths to victory. I think Marina's got to either knock her out or skirt around the outside, keep the fight upright, win a decision based on her striking. And I think this is a great, great fight. But I think Jessica Andrade, Bate Estaca, the pile driver from Brazil, is going to get the job done here in a battle of intra-Brazil conflict. Two Brazilian women that have always put it on the line in this strawweight division. But the most finishes in strawweight history belongs to Jessica Andrade, and I think she's going to run her tally up on Saturday. Next up, guys, we got Bobby King Green taking on Jim Miller. And the context of this fight is Bobby Green making a quick turnaround here 4 months after getting brutally knocked out. We got to take a sip for Bobby Green. Appreciate his efforts inside the octagon. Always a gangster. King of the cage back in the day. We really respect the shit out of Bobby Green. But, guys, Jalen Turner did him so bad in that fight. Brutal beatdown, brutal knockout. And, I would have felt like, you credit Jalen Turner a little bit more, but we've actually seen Bobby's chin regressing over time. He was pitching a shutout against Drew Dober. He was landing every shot he wanted to. He was absolutely outclassing him in the boxing. And then Drew Dober changed his fortunes in an instant, big shots in the pocket, big counter boxing, and knocked him the hell out. And I thought that was the end of Bobby Green because, guys, when you look, he has the hands down style. He takes a lot of risks. He invites a lot of shots. He's not afraid to exchange. And when you do that with a guy like Jalen Turner, he's trying to draw out the shots. He's trying to make him miss. He's trying to survive that first round and drag him late into the deep waters. But unfortunately, he was getting lit up. He was getting red. He was getting timed. He was getting beat up, and he got blasted, knocked out, brutally, finished multiple times. Should have been stopped. The ref was way late to intervene. And now he's getting right back in the octagon. That seems not wise. I think that's a traumatic brain injury, waiting to happen. And I don't wish that lightly upon anybody. But Jim Miller still packs a punch, man. He still throws very hard. He still trains very hard. And he's got great submission chops as well. You look at Bobby Green, he's a good grappler. He's a good counter grappler. He's a good anti-grappler. But he's also not as good a grappler in terms of his proven submission abilities as a guy like Jim Miller. And I don't think that's up for debate, really. So when you look at who's got the submission upside, I would say that's probably, unless it's late in the fight and Jim Miller is completely exhausted, it's probably Jim Miller. Who's got more knockout upside? I would say it's probably close, but I would also lean towards the Miller side just because he's been quite durable throughout his career. He fought Alexander Hernandez, a young kid, on the come-up, didn't get knocked out there. And Bobby Green, not a prolific knockout artist in his own right. Even a fight where he dominated against Nasrat Hakparas, landed every shot he could have possibly wanted, never came close to putting him in danger. So I think that for this fight, man, Jim Miller is, probably the public side, but I also think he might win. I just think like Jim Miller, UFC 100, 200, 300. He used to train with my coach. So all biases acknowledged there, but I just really believe in Jim Miller. I've bet on him a number of times in this run as an underdog. He's post-Lyme disease. My man got it all sorted out, all figured out. He's been looking a lot better. In these recent performances, I feel relative to his cardio, he had a real drop off when he was experiencing Lyme disease. He looked physically weaker. He looked slower. And now he's older and looking better than he used to. And so maybe it's USADA, maybe it's whatever. I don't care, man. It's Jim Miller. He's a legend in my book, no matter which way you slice it, no matter if he wins or loses on Saturday. But I think people count out the legend at your own peril, man. Bobby Green's making a really quick turn. I think he's got inopportune circumstances. I think he could be hesitant off that knockout loss. And I think that Jim Miller on the other side is playing with house money. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to fight like an absolute dog. And unless this fight goes to the cards, I think Jim Miller's got a very good chance to win it. And even if it does go to the cards, maybe he gets those sympathy cards. We know that Bobby Green has had a couple times where he's went out there and, he thought he won the fight. Judges disagreed, right? So I do think we could definitely see a close competitive fight here, maybe a little closer than the line suggests. But Bobby Green, at his best, would have won this fight, I believe. His takedown defense was good. His boxing was sharp. But I do think that we could see a diminished version of Bobby Green. He's a little bit older, a little bit long in the tooth. He's been fighting the best guys, but the record has been showing that. He's been getting finished more often. He's been getting TKO'd. He's been getting put away. And the effort against Islam Makhachev, I honestly felt left a lot to be desired. I know Islam's got the level gap and the skills and this and that, but I thought that, Bobby just didn't really have anything to show in that fight whatsoever, which was a little bit surprising to me. So overall, I'm just leaning a little bit more towards the Jim Miller side in this fight. I think he's dangerous with that left hook. I think he could catch Bobby Green with that shot. I think he can catch him with the calf kicks and his shots upstairs as well. Bobby does a lot of head movement, a lot of trunk movement. And when you do that, it does open up those calf kicks. We saw Dustin Poirier get challenged by the calf kicks of Jim Miller. So I think that Jim Miller is the side here at plus money. But I haven't taken any bets on that fight to this point. Last but certainly not least, guys, what have we here? It's champion versus champion to open the card. Talk about depth. Talk about a fight card that really lives up to the billing and the expectations. The first fight of the damn night is Cody Garbrandt taking on Davison Figueiredo Daistugera, the God of War. Fantastic matchmaking. Why? You've got Cody Garbrandt on the one side. His chin has been called into question. I would say it's partially his chin. It's partially his decision-making, right? He gets cracked a little bit by Pedro Munoz. Does he try to recover? Does he try to move away, circle? No, he like calls him on, says, I'm emotional. I want to get in the pocket, points to the ground, gets back in there, starts swinging wild. And then eventually Pedro Munoz, who had a better chin, and was making better decisions with his timing, with his right hands, was able to take Cody out of the fight. And we've seen that with TJ Dillashaw. We've seen that with other guys. But we also saw against Kai Kara-France. He went out there. He tried to low kick from inside boxing range. I posted this on Twitter as well if you want the clip for reference. I posted this. He goes out there and he's standing in boxing range, goes for a naked low kick. Kai Kara-France reads it, from a mile away, and he's able to drop him with big shots there over the top, right hand. And Cody was able to recover again. So is it his chin or is it his, inability to make good decisions and then recover when things go wrong? I think that there's been ego problems for Cody in the past. I do think he's been humbled by the game. I think he's brought in the best coaching. I think he's tried to do everything he can, mixing it up. This coach, that coach, trying to get different looks. And I do think that Cody Garbrandt has shown in his recent fights a little bit more confidence, a little bit more zip on his punches, a little bit more vigor, a little bit more aggression. But we've also seen, some of the same problems, some of the same tendencies, risk taking, hurts somebody, puts his hands down, gets a little cocky, chin goes up. And against a better fighter than Brian Kelleher, with all due respect, he could be made to pay for those tendencies. And Daistugera, very dangerous fighter, man. He's got great punching mechanics at times, can whip off hard shots to the body, to the head, single shots. He's not much of a combination guy most of the time. Likes to work off one big single shot. But as Luke Thomas used to say about John Jones, single shot, high variance. That's kind of the way that I see Figueiredo. He can throw a couple shots in combination, but most of the time he's going to be looking to throw one big hook, one big overhand, one big body kick, a low kick. He's going to snap something off and really make it count when he throws. And I think that for Garbrandt, at his best, how did he win? He made people embarrassed. He made them miss. He'd get them out of position, and then he'd punish them because he's fast. He's got stinging shots. He's a pretty good counter puncher. He's got good boxing, but he doesn't have great durability, and he doesn't always make great decisions. So he's hard to back at chalk. He's hard to back in closely lined fights. But I do think there's some interest, mild interest, in the Garbrandt underdog price here. And the only reason I say that is because you look at a guy in Figueiredo, and he's 36 years of age, right? He's no spring chicken. He kind of moved up late in his career, and he's definitely a dangerous fighter. But a lot of what he brought to the table was he was huge. He was a massive hitter in flyweight, which doesn't have a lot of big hitters. And he's an opportunistic submission grappler. He can go out there and snatch a neck on people. You look at Cody Garbrandt, and you could definitely poke some holes in his resume. But one thing that's never happened to him, he's never had a fight win or lose by submission, right? He's a guy that typically his fights play out on the feet. So who do you favor in the submission grappling portion? I mean, it's obvious. You favor Davison Figueiredo, who's a proven grappler with his guillotine threat. But Cody Garbrandt, solid wrestler from the Ohio scene. And Ohio is a great wrestling state, just period, point blank. He was a football player as well. He's a credentialed athlete. He's 9-5 in the UFC, and he's got an ability to go out there and win fights by knockout, right? He's got 11 wins by knockout, 4 losses via KO in his career. And he's 3-1 career to the decision. His only decision loss was against Rob Font, but that was one-sided. He kind of got beat up there. The durability was definitely tested in that fight as well. It held up, but it was tested. He cut to 125. It didn't work out for him at all. He got knocked out by Kai Kara-France. And his last 2 wins at 135 are just not convincing enough for me. He beat Trevin 5-star Jones, a guy I respect, but a guy who's really been low volume and wasn't cut out for the UFC, all things considered. And Brian Kelleher, on the other hand, had just come off of neck surgery. I actually thought Cody was live to win his first fight by submission against Boom, not because he's better at jiu-jitsu, but just because I thought Boom might tap if he got put into a compromised situation with his neck. And now I'm looking at a fight where Davison Figueiredo is looking for, another win on his UFC resume. He's looking for a 12th win. And I do think that, he's just so dangerous, and Cody is a little bit fragile. So for me, I feel like what's going to happen is we're probably going to see, Cody winning minutes on the feet. I think he's probably going to come down in the live market to a much more manageable price. So maybe you can get plus money on both sides. But I just feel like Davison eventually is going to connect with something that changes the complexion of the fight. And whether Cody ends up making a bad decision and getting shin checked, or whether he shoots a bad takedown and gets guillotined, I do think he's probably going to lose this fight. But I also think that you can't lay the -3XX price with Davison here, given the unknowns, because Davison did slow down a little bit against Rob Font. He does have a win against a common opponent, but he does not have a deep resume at 135 pounds. And he did look to slow down. He's 36 years of age. It looks like he's having a tough weight cut now, even to 135. So for me, going to have to watch the weigh-ins a little bit here and see how this one shakes out, because Figgy, it doesn't get easier to cut weight as you get older. And I know he moved up a division, but that still doesn't always make it easy. Sometimes your body just wants to add mass when you start to give it anything. And I think that might be what Davison's dealing with here. He looked very uncomfortable at the press conference today. So great fight, great night, UFC 300. Guys, if you missed the announcement earlier in the show, tomorrow, Bets and Banter, a panel show. We've got Clint from Die Hard MMA. We've got Just Win Baby. We've got John Stargarian from Club and Sub, an absolute power panel to break down UFC 300 for you. You won't want to miss it. 7 p.m. tomorrow in the East. The link will be up, but make sure if you never want to miss a live stream, go ahead and turn on that notification bell. If you always want to get my content in your feed, go ahead and subscribe on the YouTube channel. I really appreciate the support. I'm going to put this out on podcast. I'm going to put out the Bets and Banter show on podcast as well. If you appreciate that content, if you get value from the podcast, which is totally ad-free, by the way, then go ahead and let me know by giving me a 5-star review on one of your local podcast platforms. I'd really appreciate that support. Helps other people find the show. Tell a friend about it. If you got fight fans in your life that are, dabbling a little bit, want to gamble, want to learn a little bit more about gambling, I think that it's a great show where we try and give a case for both sides, right? I try not to hit you guys with this guy's the lock and this is going to be so obvious and all these things. I try and mix it up and say, hey, here's the path for this fighter. Here's the path for this fighter. Here's what I'm leaning towards. Here's what I think is value. And I try and be, as much is required, right? If I don't feel something, I'm not going to say it. If I don't care about a fight, I'm not going to lie and say I care. But I'm also going to try and give you guys my honest feelings, my thoughts, my impressions. And I'm going to keep doing work. I'm going to keep doing research. We're going to try and leave absolutely no stone left unturned for UFC 300. If you guys want access to my resources, my documents, my previous performance and odds range, the social media A-side report, and everything else that I do on a weekly basis, the spreadsheets, all that stuff, it's simply on Patreon, LiamPicksFights. The description down below, you'll find that information. A lot of people in there rocking with us. We've had a losing week last week, but we've had a winning year so far. Year to date, we're doing very well. We're happy with the results, and it's slow and steady. It's a long-term approach for us. A lot of cappers and a lot of fans are like, I'm all in for UFC 300. Listen, I'm going to try and treat this like any other betting slate where I'm responsible, where I'm, allocating my units responsibly, where I'm trying to make slow progress towards my goals, where I'm not trying to get out over my skis. Am I going to, have some degenerate bets for fun or what? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but overall, guys, I'm here to win money. I'm here to try and be successful over time. I'm here to try and make the right plus EV decisions, and I'm here to try and help other people do the same thing. So that's an important part of my game is bankroll management. I'm not going to try and put 25, 30 units on the line. Personally, this is my approach. Everybody can have a different approach, but I'm not going to put that kind of exposure out on the line because right now I feel like it's better to take a steady week by week approach, slow and steady. There's a ton of fights all the time, a lot of opportunities. You don't have to rush every opportunity, but trying to get good bets, trying to avoid bad bets, trying to place plus money, plus EV wagers. That's my goal. And if you guys rock with that, Keep on supporting. I appreciate you being here. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you to everybody who stayed up this late with me. Drop a like on YouTube if you could be so kind. And like I said, if you have comments, questions, concerns, anything we did not get to on the show, go ahead and drop that down in the comment section down below. And I'd be more than happy to try and address that for you. The other way to easily get a hold of me is in that Patreon chat. I'm very active in there. I'm normally talking at all hours of the night. I try and put in a lot of work, to really justify my existence each and every week. So whether you're tail fade or indifferent, you're going to get valuable resources and information that can help you win. So that's what I'm proud of. That's what I believe in. And it's back to work for me. So I've got articles to write early this week. I've got a ton of content coming your way. So appreciate everybody for rocking with me. Can't wait to talk to you guys again tomorrow with that great panel for bets and banter. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. And until UFC 300, keep on rocking, everybody. God bless you. We'll see you all again.